Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
Fudge, the lovable but edgy slime, spent most of his time doing the very serious and very important job of looking over the king's region, which was essentially his master's kingdom, as he would like to call it. "No one shall pass my sight," Fudge said as he stood on top of a tree, overlooking the whole mountain ranges. "I am as swift as the wind and as invisible as the air. I shall spread my master's words to the furthest lands that light can touch," he declared with a serious voice. Sir Fudge, are we done here?" Below him were some Rebornians who were forced to role-play as Fudge's loyal shadows. Michael had tasked them to go with the slime's playtime and make sure that he didn't cause any trouble. Despite Fudge's big promises and his serious words, the Rebornians simply couldn't treat him seriously. Case in point, Fudge suddenly dropped down to the ground and raised his hand towards an innocent little squirrel that had burrowed out of her lair. "You, what are you doing here? Are you infiltrating our territory? Tell me now." Squeak. Of course, it was nothing more than an ordinary and defenseless animal that was horror-stricken from seeing Fudge's violet body suddenly descend from the air. It was so scared that it suddenly dropped a little present for Fudge. "Stay tuned to Empire." You're a normal squirrel. I knew that. I was simply testing you," Fudge said as he let the squirrel go back into his burrow. As a consolation, Fudge gave the little guy an acorn for his troubles. Although he was a little bit quirky and weird, the Rebornians still adore their boss Fudge. Despite his antics, his kindness was overflowing to the point that it could completely overshadow his tendencies to be too caught up in his fantasies. But of course, that didn't mean that they wanted to go along with his make-believe ninja club. "Come guys, let's practice throwing shurikens at wooden logs and running on water. You guys still run like humans. From now on, I want you to run with your hands on your back." The Rebornians sighed. "Sir Fudge, I think it would be best if we return." But before they could say anything else, Fudge raised his hand and made them stop talking. "What's that? I feel something is coming." "It's probably peddlers coming from the Queen's region," his attendant said. "Boss said that we shouldn't bother them when they come." "Nonsense," Fudge said. "Who knows? Maybe they have the potential to become ninjas. Maybe one of them even has the ability to store a nine-tailed monster in their body. I have to meet them." Before Fudge's caretakers could stop him, the violet slime suddenly disappeared into the ground as a shadow and reappeared right in front of an expensively adorned carriage. Even though he prided himself as a ninja, Fudge made no attempt to hide his presence. He just jumped right in front of the carriage, forcing them and the escorts behind it to stop. "Halt, visitors!" Fudge shouted to the carriages. A few seconds passed before the door opened to the leading carriage. A young girl with a red dress came out, accompanied by a female ogre wearing a maid's outfit. The ogre eyed Fudge with a cautious look, while the young girl eyed Fudge with an amused look on her face. It was Una Montgomery and her escorts. A few seconds later, more humans and demi-humans came out of the escort carriages to look at the one responsible for stopping them right in the middle of the mountainous road. At the very back, a group of meat komodos peeked out as well, curious as to who the strange violet slime was. "Who are you, and why have you stopped our progress?" the female ogre beside Una asked, with a bit of an aggressive tone. "Please, Agnes, there's no need for you to treat him this way." "What's your name?" Una asked Fudge. "I am the incarnation of shadows. I am the seeker of the void. I am everywhere and nowhere at the same time. If you have any malicious intent against my master, then I will know even before you think of it. That is because I am a ninja." Fudge jumped up in the air, transforming his violet body into a ninja outfit, complete with the hood, the bandana, and the metal plate. Agnes and the rest of Una's demi-human escorts looked at Fudge with a strange gaze. They didn't know how to respond. Despite his words, he didn't look intimidating at all, especially with his weird getup. Sorry. He means no harm. He's actually a very nice slime." Finally, the Rebornians in charge of being Fudge's caretakers arrived and quickly resolved the situation. Seeing the fellow demi-human Rebornians, Agnes and the rest of the escort let down their guards. Just from one look at the Rebornians, Agnes immediately recognized it as the same relationship as parent and child. The Rebornians looked like exhausted parents who always tried and failed to rein in their troublesome child. Agnes changed her opinion of Fudge. At first, she thought he was a dangerous individual, but now she thought of Fudge as a harmless idiot. "He's our boss pet," the Rebornians said apologetically. Fudge took offense to that. "I am not Master's pet. I am his ninja," he shouted to them. But nobody seemed to believe him. Even Agnes and the rest of Yuna's demi-human escorts looked at Fudge as if they didn't believe a word that he said. Fudge's proud, bulbous figure suddenly deflated as he realized no one believed him for even a second. Doubt started to fill his mind. "Oh my, you're a ninja? This is the first time I've ever seen one in real life." Yuna gasped. Fudge's body inflated upon hearing Yuna's words. Yes, I am," he shouted. After a few seconds, he looked up at Yuna and quietly asked, "Do you believe that I'm a ninja?" Yuna smiled. "Of course I do. You can be anything you want to be." Fudge's eyes widened. Nobody had ever believed him before. Fudge looked at Yuna and saw nothing but genuinity in her eyes. It was obvious. She really believed that Fudge was a ninja. This was the first time anyone had ever believed Fudge's claims to be a ninja. Most of them didn't even know what Fudge was talking about, and even if they did, then they would always treat him like a child telling bold lies. "If you're a ninja, can you run on water? Can you clone yourself into a wooden log?" Yuna asked, with her eyes completely filled with curiosity. Yes, I can," Fudge shouted enthusiastically. "I can do more. I can use a mystical eye and trap my enemies into an illusion." "Whoa," Yuna said as she slowly clapped for Fudge. Meanwhile, the Rebornians, and even her personal attendant Agnes, was surprised that Yuna was going along with the slime's fantasies. Even fellow Rebornians and demi-humans would cast Fudge's words as nothing more than role-playing, but Yuna treated it as if it was real. "Tell me more," Yuna said. Fudge jumped into Yuna's arms and began to tell her all of his antics and his ambitions in the world, just like a child would when a teacher asked them about what they wanted to achieve in their life. "Sorry about this," the Rebornian Hobmankeys said. "No, it's fine. The young miss is quite fond of demi-humans. This is not the first time she has picked up a cute pet from the side of the road. No offense," Agnes said, looking fondly at Yuna. The Rebornians didn't feel offended. After all, even they refer to Fudge as a cute pet on the side of the road sometimes. "Are you here to travel to the King's region? If so, then we can help you get to where you want to go," the Hobmankeys said. Agnes nodded. "We would be grateful if you did. We want to stop by Maplewood Village just beyond the mountain ranges so that we can replenish our resources." "We can certainly do that," the Rebornians replied. With their help, Yuna and her escorts safely crossed the dangerous mountain ranges and finally reached the King's region. On the way, the Rebornians and Yuna's escorts shared stories amongst themselves. They introduced themselves as Yuna's personal guards that accompanied her everywhere she went. And in this particular mission, their job was to escort the young lady to the Magic Tower in Kingsbridge to meet the famous 8-star, tranquil, blazing king of fire, Cerberus Augendor. Agnes introduced herself as Yuna's personal attendant and her caretaker, serving her since her birth. Then, the Rebornians introduced themselves and told Agnes that they were part of the nation of Reborn. This confused Agnes at first. In all her research to prepare for this journey, she had never heard of a sovereign nation established in the King's region. When the Hobmankey explained that their nation had just formed, it finally made sense. In Agnes' mind, the nation of Reborn was just a small group of secluded people that decided to declare themselves as their own nation. It happened a lot in the Queen's region. Some people would even call a small plot of land the size of a house as their own nation. "Oh, we're also part of a company. You might have heard of it," the Hobmankeys mentioned. "No, what's it called?" "The Reborn Company," he replied. Agnes dismissed it as nothing special. She hadn't heard of that company in the Queen's region, so she thought that it was just a simple business confined in one small town or village. "What's that?" Meanwhile, Eunice sat on her seat with Fudge on her lap when she suddenly caught sight of the flat concrete roads connecting to the Maplewood village. "Find adventures on Empire." Agnes peeked out of the window of her carriage and saw it as well. Not only that, she also noticed something wrong with Maplewood Village itself. "I think we're in the wrong place," Agnes said. "That doesn't look like Maplewood Village." The hobman key shook his head. "No, we're on the right track. That is Maplewood Village." Despite that, Agnes couldn't believe what she was seeing. She expected a small townlet, with a population only in the hundreds and houses primarily made out of wood and thatch. But what she caught a glimpse of was something completely different. There were big stone houses reaching 2 to 3 floors. There were flat roads coming in and out of the village, and even from far away, they could see that the place was jam-packed with people in the middle of the day. The King's region was considered to be the rural area of the country, more so in the Maplewood Village since it was so far away from the capital, Kingsbridge City. But somehow, Maplewood Village looked more like a city from the wealthier parts of the Queen's region. Agnes couldn't believe it. But perhaps the strangest thing of all was the strange metal box carriages that had no horses dragging it forward. Agnes thought that there was a beast hiding inside the vehicle, especially since it was roaring as it drove forward. After a few more minutes, they finally reached the Maplewood Village, allowing the locals of the Queen's region to witness the miracles of the Reborn Company products firsthand. Whoa, the road is so flat. What are those strange carriages? How is that metal flowing with water? They saw people washing their fresh produce on the metal faucets, treating water as if it was just a free resource. They saw people lining up to get on a large carriage called Reborn Taxi. They felt as if they were looking at a completely different world. The flat roads, the stone buildings, and now this strange carriage. A lot of things have changed in the King's region. Agnes exclaimed, "Oh yeah, our boss did that." The Hobmankeys replied casually. He seemed to have inherited Michael's tendency to be nonchalant in his responses. "Huh," Agnes blurted out. Meanwhile, Una looked around Maplewood Village with complete shock and awe written all over her face. Seeing this, Fudge couldn't help but be proud. "Isn't my master so great? I'm sure if you meet him, you'll like him. He's nice just like you." Anyone from the Queen's region would be stunned if they saw what was happening in the King's region. The plumbing system alone would cause a commotion among the wealthy for its clean and efficient way of disposing of waste. Even the richest territories in the Queen's region still used manual labor to gather water from a well or had to hire a water mage for their services. The fact that even a remote village in the middle of nowhere could have easy access to water with just a simple twist of a lever made their lives so much better than even kings, queens, and royals. But perhaps the most intriguing product Reborn offered was their automobiles, which used no magic nor horses to power themselves to run at speeds that were only below that of dragons. This magnificent piece of machinery could solve the distance problem in the Queen's region. Most of the obstacles businesses and even armies faced in the Queen's region was the fact that it took a long time for people to traverse from one territory to another. This essentially forced places to become isolated and secluded from other locations. That was why things that happened on the northern side of the Queen's region would only be known in the southern part of the Queen's region a few years later. But in the King's region, it seemed that all the cities, towns, and villages were a lot more connected and up-to-date with each other. This was all due to the fact that the Reborn Company offered their taxi services to people who couldn't afford to buy their own automobiles. Now, people near the parched lands could visit the further side of the King's region within just a few days of travel. Business boomed, with companies using their newly purchased trucks from the Reborn Company to good use. Agnes looked at the products sold on the Maplewood Village's wet markets and saw that it was a lot more diverse than before, offering the signature moist herbs of the Grass Valley and even the dried delicacy cactus fruits in the parched lands. For what she heard, these could cost up to tens of gold coins. But now, it could be bought with silver coins. Agnes thought about the other expensive products in the Queen's region. If they had automobiles, it would allow impoverished territories lacking food and nourishment to finally break free from the high taxes and prices that vendors impose on them. "This road is so flat," Eunice said. "What is it called?" Fudge jumped up from her lap and landed on her head. "It is called concrete, and it is something that my master came up with." The Rebornians further explained the benefits of concrete, and how it could be used to create entire roads and buildings in just under a few days. It was cheap too, so most territories began to implement them in their buildings, upgrading them to concrete. Amazing, Agnes praised. This concrete would settle so many problems in the Queen's region. Fudge peeked at Yuna's face from above her head. You guys are from the Queen's region? He asked her. Yes, that's where I was born, she answered. You didn't have to go through the dangerous mountain ranges. Didn't you know there was a really big earthquake a year ago? It created a really big landslide. It could have happened to you too. Fudge said with a worried look. I don't want my only believer to slip and fall. If you're gone, who's going to believe that I'm a ninja? When you visit next time, you should use our highway. Yuna looked at the violet slime. There's a highway here? Yes, our boss is about to open a road connecting the King's region to the Queen's region, the Hobmanki explained. But how is that possible? Angie's asked. The mountain ranges are far too steep and dangerous to build in, even with your concrete roads. You just said that there was a landslide here a year ago, so the road would only last a year or so before it gets destroyed. Fudge jumped up from Yuna's head and landed on the ground. He crossed his blobby hands against his chest and turned his head up, with his non-existent face brimming with pride. Who said we built it in the mountain ranges? Master has already struck a deal with the Dwarven King about creating a road that goes around their kingdom. Fudge exclaimed. Agnes and Yuna couldn't hold in their surprise and stood there, stunned in silence. Even as a child, Yuna had already been taught and trained about every species, territory, and nation located in this country. Your next read awaits at Empire. Her family propped her up to be the foremost diplomat in the entire world. To do that, she had to be aware of every political situation in the entire country, including those that were allied and at war against each other. In her history classes, a lot of alliances had formed, changed, and broken apart in the thousands of years of history in the country. It was normal to hear about a territory being allied with another territory for 1,000 years, but fall apart and become mortal enemies within just a few years. But never once did the Dwarven Kingdom change their stance about their closed-door policy. No one had convinced them. Neither the incentive of gold nor the threat of war could make them open their doors. Everyone thought that it would continue for the years to come. That was until this moment, when they found out that someone had successfully allied with the Dwarven Kingdom. The Reborn company has a partnership with the Dwarven Kingdom? Agnes asked, her words stammering. Does that mean that you have access to the infamous Damascus steel? The Rebornians all nodded their heads, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. Agnes would have never known that they would witness a world-changing event right in front of their eyes. The Reborn company was still unknown in the Queen's region right now, but she knew that that wouldn't last long. It was as if she was looking at a bomb with its fuse lit up. It was just seconds away from exploding and completely changing the landscape of the world by storm. Meanwhile, the Komodos were on their own in the Maplewood village, looking and observing everything there was to see. Unlike Yuna and Agnes, these Komodos weren't interested in seeing the new inventions of the Reborn company. Instead, they were deeply interested in the demi-humans comprising the Reborn company. Just from one look alone, they already knew that these demi-humans were different. They exuded so much more strength than the normal demi-humans, as if they were imbued with power from their very being itself. Yellow mankeys weren't that uncommon in the Queen's region where they were from. They had even seen blue mankeys performing in the streets and red mankeys hauling materials on the road. However, the yellow mankeys in the Reborn company were completely different from what they were used to. Their faces looked much more human, with their back straight and their posture taller than normal. Weirdest of all was the golden streaks of design on their fur. Not only that, but these yellow mankeys could cast spells and skills that were much purer than even the elves they saw in the Queen's region. That wasn't supposed to be possible. From what they and everyone else knew in the Queen's region, yellow mankeys were the weakest race in the entire world. They didn't have the intelligence of humans, nor did they have the aptitude to cast any magic spells. They were worse than regular humans, and even worse than Komodos. But somehow, these Rebornians spoke the fluent human language and showed crafting talents even greater than dwarves. It wasn't just one of them. It was all of them. While they were walking around, they heard about a certain place with many names. Some people called it the paradise in the desert, while some called it the place where the stars land. It didn't take them to hear its official name, the nation of Reborn. The Komodos approached the Hobmankeys working construction on the road and asked them about this nation. The Hobmankey happily talked to them with a proud smile on their faces, describing to the Komodos what they loved about their nation back in the parched lands. They were so enthusiastic about talking that they ended up just overlapping their sentences. The Komodos could only hear something about baseball, beer, electricity, food, and love. But even if they didn't know what the Mankeys were talking about, it was clear from their excitement alone that this was a place that they proudly called home. They talked extensively about their boss and how he was the one who gave them everything they had ever asked for and more. He was the reason why they were working here in Maplewood Village away from their families. They wanted to repay everything that Michael had done for them. After all, he was the one who evolved them into what they were now. Upon hearing this, the Komodos couldn't help but look at each other in complete awe and excitement. Could the nation of Reborn be the place where they could regain the glory of their species? Just the possibility of this thought made all the hardships they experienced getting here worth it. But of course, they didn't get ahead of themselves. The nation of Reborn looked like a literal paradise. If they wanted to join them, then they had to work for it, no matter the cost. "We want to be a citizen of your nation," the juvenile male Komodo said. "We are willing to do anything." The Hobmankeys gave him a big smile. "Sure, you can join us. There's a bus that leads you straight to the parched lands. You can take that." The Komodo looked confused. "And then what?" he asked the Hobmankey, expecting to hear more requirements. "You just need to get on the bus. Just tell the driver that you want to become a citizen of our nation, and you won't have to pay the fee. After you guys arrive in the nation, just look for Lolo or Kong. They'll tell you where you can build your houses." "That's it. Haha." The Hobmankeys chuckled. "There's nothing else. You become a citizen anytime you like." Excitement filled the Komodos' faces. They just needed to go back to the parched lands, and they could finally reach their dream. They could finally restore their pride. The young Komodos eagerly returned to thank Yuna for her hospitality for the past few days. They wouldn't have been able to cross here if it weren't for her. But when they got back, it seemed that Yuna and her escorts also had the intention of visiting the nation of Reborn in the parched lands. After hearing everything that the Reborn Company achieved in just a few years, Yuna and her escorts had no choice but to see this nation for themselves. They decided to leave their horses and carriages in Maplewood Village and just use the Reborn bus taxi to go around the King's region. After all, it was much faster than the automobile, and it would give them a chance to see how different a car was compared to a horse-drawn carriage. They used the Montgomery family money to rent out a few Reborn buses for their own use. The Komodos joined them again since they liked Yuna and the Demi-Humans company. After a few more hours of preparation, they were finally done to embark on the journey deeper towards the King's region. Before they left, Fudge said his goodbyes to Yuna and the rest of them. "It's too bad I can't join you. I still have a mission here to fulfill. My ninja code prevents me from running away from my responsibilities," Fudge said, sulking with his back against the wall like a tortured vagabond. Yuna peeked out of the window of the bus and pouted at Fudge. "It's too bad you already have a master," she said, pursing her lips disappointedly. "Don't worry. There's a way for you to become my master as well through a more official connection with my master." "I will work on it," Fudge whispered. "Huh? Did you say something?" "No, madam. It must have just been the wind," Fudge replied with a nervous laugh. Fudge waved goodbye as Yuna and her escorts departed on Reborn buses towards Kingsbridge City. They were going to stop by the capital of the King's region first before they journeyed to the parched lands. Despite how much Fudge wanted to join Yuna and tell her all about his ninja escapades, Fudge had to go somewhere else today. No matter how tempting it was to hear how fascinated she was about him being a good ninja, Fudge couldn't forget his responsibilities. But maybe he could slip by in their carriage for just a few days. "No, I have a job to do," Fudge scolded himself. He looked around Maplewood Village and saw the local inhabitants minding their own business, completely ignoring his existence, just like a good ninja. When he confirmed that no one was looking at him, Fudge descended into the shadow of a house and disappeared completely, reappearing in a vastly different space. There was nothing but darkness around in this new place, except for a dim ray of light that illuminated the corner of the room where a person sat comfortably in a chair. This person looked completely relaxed, casually sipping tea as Fudge ascended from the shadows. It seemed that this person expected to see the ninja slime. Fudge, our usual meetings aren't till 2 days later. Is there something urgent you want to report? The person asked, their voice having a hint of boredom in its tone. Yes, I have something amazing to share, Fudge replied as he bowed towards this person in the room. Well, what is it? Don't leave me hanging and save me from the monotony and dullness of my life during these past few days, the person said expectantly. Fudge skipped closer to the person. I was monitoring the borders of the King's region, performing my usual checks to observe everything that was coming in and out of the territory, when all of a sudden, I saw a squirrel dart past my eyes. I chased after it, thinking it was an enemy. But it turned out that I was wrong. Fudge, get to the point. The person interrupted, completely annoyed at Fudge's tendencies to stray too far away from the subject at hand. Right, Fudge replied. After that, we met some people who came from the Queen's region. Long story short, I found her. I found the perfect match for my master. The person sitting in the corner went silent for a few seconds. Then, they leaned forward, letting the thin ray of light finally shine a light on their face. Her radiant blue eyes were reminiscent of Michael's eyes. It was Lilia Vanderbilt. It seemed that she was the one who had been indulging in Fudge's little club that he was trying to form. Since she was Michael's mother, she was the president of their Michael Club, with Fudge serving as the servant in the shadows. Usually, their meetings consisted of Fudge reporting to Lilia about everything that Michael was doing on a day-to-day basis. This included what he ate for breakfast, dinner, and lunch, as well as who he spent it with. But as Michael's business began to spread across the King's region, and possibly even further, both Fudge and Lilia knew that they had to get more members to help them manage the club in the shadows. They had plenty of other members, Rebornians who had the talent to become a ninja like Fudge. However, they were just surface-level members. They still needed some high-level officers in their club. As of now, no one worthy had yet to show up for them to give this precious spot to. That was until Fudge seemed to have found the perfect candidate in Una Montgomery. Even though Fudge's motivation to make Una into Michael's partner was completely backed by a selfish reason, mostly because he wanted to get pet by her all the time, Fudge still thought that Una was a potential candidate even by Lilia's standard. Fudge couldn't explain it, but it seemed as if Una was the perfect match for Michael, and vice versa. That was why Fudge wanted to plan a little scheme to get the two of them together, just to test the waters. But of course, none of this would matter if Lilia deemed her as unworthy. You think so, huh? Interesting. Tell me more, Lilia said with a mysterious smile on her lips. Meanwhile, unaware of his wife's scheming, Bart Vanderbilt took his personal automobile, gifted to him by his son, into the magic tower of Kingsbridge City. As he entered the tower, the mages and wizards working on the first floor greeted him with a friendly smile, which he reciprocated with a greeting of his own. This was not the first time he had been in the magic tower this week. Ever since he had given up on managing the Vanderbilt business in the King's region, Bart found himself out of work and bored out of his mind. Thankfully, it seemed that he was not the only one. He unexpectedly found a friend in Cerberus Augendor, the 8-star tower master of the King's region. Michael had been far too busy managing his business and his nation these days, so the tower master had no other high-skill player to play against. It turned out that Bart was quite talented in chess, so the two of them played frequently to pass the time. They spent most of their days sipping beer and playing chess in the magic tower, improving their skills through friendly competitions. A good friend, Cerberus greeted Bart. Do you mind if we practice a few of my openings? I can't let myself be beaten by the young UNS in our competition. Bart had just entered Cerberus' room, but the chessboard was already arranged perfectly. Sure, Bart replied, but we must use a stopwatch. I need to work on thinking fast during a game. The two quickly started their game with much enthusiasm and liveliness. But just as they were about to start, Cerberus suddenly heard an apologetic wizard's voice transmit into the room. Sorry to interrupt, Tower Master. There's someone here to see you. Her name is Una. Una Montgomery greeted Bart and Cerberus with an elegant bow, showcasing her respectful manners. Hello, Tower Master, she said. Ho ho ho, it's been a while, Una. You've grown so fast. Has it only been 5 years? Cerberus said, laughing as he reminisced about seeing the little Una being so mischievous back in the Queen's region. Yes, Tower Master. My grandmother sends her regards, she replied. Cerberus got up from his seat and approached Una. How have you been? Did the spells I taught you do any good? Una nodded. Yes, Tower Master. It has improved the mana efficiency in my moves. About 5 years ago, Cerberus was invited into the Montgomery residence to ascertain the talents of a certain brilliant young girl. Usually, he wouldn't want to travel all the way there, but he owed quite a big favor to Una's grandmother, so he was forced to go there by himself. What are you doing here in the King's region? He asked her. You just turned 10 years old, right? Have you had your talent awakening? Did you get something good? From what he knew, she just had her birthday less than a month ago. Cerberus thought she would have stayed in the Queen's region to celebrate or hone her newfound skills with her grandmother, which was why he wasn't expecting to see her here in the King's region. I haven't had my talent awakening, Tower Master, but that is partially why I am here. Once I am done with my business here, I will visit a church and awaken my talent, she said with a composed face. Cerberus scratched his beard. Usually, children would be giddy and impatient to awaken their talent. Some would even stay up for 2 days before their birthday, due to their anticipation. Yet, Una looked like she wasn't in any hurry. I guess that's the perks of being a talented brat. Huh? You don't need a talent awakening to show your skills. Ha ha. Cerberus chuckled. You remind me of someone I know. Una humbly smiled and took the compliment. So, if that's not your main goal, then why are you here? Cerberus asked curiously. Una cleared her throat. I have a big favor to ask, Tower Master. Would you please teach my friend some of the spells here in the Magic Tower? Cerberus stroked his beard as he contemplated Una's request. I have already repaid my favor from your grandmother, he said with a stern look on his face. There's no reason for me to help you this time around. Cerberus knew that Una's friends were demi-humans of all varieties. Although some had the talent to cast magic, most of them did not. It would take them a lot of time and effort to teach them even a single 1-star spell. As the Tower Master, he couldn't simply waste his wizard's time teaching Una's demi-human escorts. Although he favored Una, it wasn't enough to fulfill this hard request of hers. Una pursed her lips and didn't say anything else. She was downcast with her hands on her back, sulking. Seeing this, Cerberus started to feel a little bit guilty for making it hard on a 10-year-old girl. Fine, I'll tell you what. If you can beat me in a game of chess, then I'll teach your friend some spells, he said arbitrarily. You know chess, right? Una looked past the Tower Master and saw Bart sitting next to a table filled with chess pieces. I've seen some wizards play it in their spare time, Una said, with an imperceptible glint in her eyes. To make it fair, I'll give you 3 chances to beat me. If you can force a draw, it's also your win, he kindly said to her. Bart got up from his seat and let Una take his place. The little girl looked at the chessboard with open curiosity, looking at the intricately carved pieces on the board. With a wave of his hand, Cerberus magically arranged the pieces into their proper place on the board. You're on the white side, which means that you'll... But before he could even finish his words, Una suddenly took his hand and shook it, solidifying their agreement. We shook hands. It's official. No take-backs, she said ominously. Cerberus was speechless as Una leaned on the table and made the first move as the white pieces. She did it with speed and precision, as if this wasn't the first time she had played chess. A cold sweat began to form on Cerberus' forehead. He had a bad feeling about this. A couple of minutes later, Cerberus frowned as he looked at the chess pieces on the board. Even Bart, who was behind him, couldn't help but cover his mouth as he began to realize the fact that Cerberus was about to lose. What if you move your queen here? Bart leaned in and whispered. No, then she would take my rook. How about I move my pawn here? Cerberus whispered back. Una smiled at them. No coaching, she said with a teasing tone. She knew it didn't matter. She was going to win. Shut up, brat. You said that you didn't know how to play chess. Cerberus blurted out in a panic. I never said that, she said to them innocently. I only said that I saw the other mages play chess. I never said I didn't play with them. Everything was normal for the first few moves. Cerberus was surprised that she was quite skilled at chess, especially with her placement of pieces. But he thought nothing more of it. But as the game went on, he soon realized that Yuna was like a camouflaged snake, waiting at the opportune time before she struck. And the moment she did, Cerberus could do nothing else as lost more and more pieces as the time passed by. It didn't matter if Bart and Cerberus tried to work together. They lost the moment. They underestimated the little Montgomery girl. "Checkmate," she said, playfully toppling her opponent's king piece. Cerberus sighed and slumped back in his chair. If he had a gold coin for every time that a 10-year-old child mercilessly checkmated him in chess, then he would have 2 gold coins, which wasn't a lot, but it was weird that it happened twice. Cerberus could only blame himself. He should have known that Yuna would end up as sly and crafty as her grandmother. He finally understood why she wanted to see him, specifically to ask him for this favor. Yuna must have asked the other tower masters in the Queen's region first, and all their answers were a resounding no. So she planned to visit the infamous 8-star, tranquil, blazing king of fire. He earned this title not just because of his mastery over the fire element, but also because of his impulsive tendencies to gamble with a tranquil face. Cerberus was quite famous for looking like a wise hermit who had thrown away all earthly impulses, especially with his lengthy white beard. But anyone who knew him personally would know that his face was just a facade, and in truth, he was quite an impulsive high roller in gambling places all over the world. Yuna took advantage of that fact. She knew that once Cerberus denied her request, he would offer a simple wager to give her a chance. And of course, his choice of game would be none other than chess, which was very famous amongst mages and wizards. Due to her training from the Montgomery family as a diplomat, Yuna was adept at all things related to managing territories. Chess was good practice for that. I can't believe I fell for it again. Why am I the target for 10-year-old scammers? First, it was Michael, who ended up being the one who invented chess in the first place. Now, it was Yuna, who acted like she hadn't played chess at all. We shook hands, so you can't take it back, okay? Yuna triumphantly smiled at Cerberus. The old man's hair seemed to have turned even whiter. Sure, whatever. Thank you, Tower Master. I'll consider it your gift for my talent awakening later. With one of her goals done, Yuna profusely thanked Bart and Cerberus for their time and quickly left the room, afraid that the Tower Master would change his mind. She would now go to the Kingsbridge City Church and awaken her talent. Bart consoled his friend. Don't mind it. You couldn't have known she was that good at chess. Cerberus shook his head. No, I should have known better. That kid's always been a brilliant child. But what's impressive about her is not just her smarts, but also her talent in the way of the rapier. That girl was talented in weapons. Bart asked as he glanced at the door where Yuna had left from. Yes, Cerberus nodded. Their family is famous for their sharp minds, but this is perhaps the first time they had birthed someone talented in the physical arts. Did you know that she could have been recruited as a squire in the Order of the Heavenly Knights? Bart was shocked. The Order, as it was famously called, was an elite group of sword masters and weapon experts famous for being the foremost guild that nurtured the best physical art masters in the world. The mages and wizards had the Guild of Arcana, while the swordsmen and knights had the Order. Magical arts used spells to throw water, ice, and fire out of their hands, while physical arts used spells to imbue their weapons with elemental mana to increase their power. From what Bart heard, only those with a 4-star mana core and a proven win against a squire from the Order could make a person qualified to join. Not only that, candidates were only allowed to try out at 15 years old and above. Yuna was only 10. This meant that she was probably offered tutelage from one of the 10 Heavenly Knights. Why is she here then? Shouldn't she be rigorously training under her master? Bart asked with a bit of panic. Even he thought it was wasteful of her to spend her time away from training. After all, she could become one of the Heavenly Knights in the future. Huh, Cerberus chuckled. She's just like Michael in that regard. He could have also joined our Guild of Arcana when he was 5 years old and been nurtured to become a mystic master like myself. But for some reason, he chose to follow your grandfather's footsteps and started a company. Una could have joined the order, but she refused and chose to follow in her grandmother's footsteps. She wanted to become a diplomat. I would have said it was a waste of talent, but clearly they both are prospering in their own chosen fields. Continue your journey on Empire. The two men were silent for a few seconds before Bart suddenly remembered something. Wait, diplomat? What was her last name again? Montgomery. Her full name is Una Montgomery, Cerberus replied. Bart took a deep breath as he suddenly realized why Una looked familiar. What is it? Cerberus asked, curious as to why Bart acted as if he had just discovered a secret of the world. When Michael had his first birthday, we invited everyone we could think of, Bart recalled. Most of the people in the Queen's region decided to send proxies, but there was one family who personally traveled for months on end to accept our invitation. It was the Montgomery family. Cerberus looked at Bart, still confused. What are you trying to get at? My wife chatted them up and found out that they had just birthed a baby daughter of their own. Now, we may have drunk a couple of bottles of alcohol, but by the end of the night, we had agreed to arrange the marriage for the two of them. Cerberus looked at Bart in pure disbelief. You mean to tell me that Michael and Una are engaged to be married? Do they know about this? Michael doesn't know, Bart said, a bit ashamedly. The Tower Master clicked his tongue in disappointment to the Vanderbilt father. Well, you couldn't have known that she would end up in the King's region so early, Cerberus consoled his friend. And who knows? Maybe things will end up better than you thought. Fate works in mysterious ways. Are you sure she's here? A woman wearing a hat that covered her eyes and a scarf that covered her mouth whispered to a nearby wall. Yes, madam, she entered the magic tower under an hour ago, replied the shadow cast over the wall. After hearing such good praises from Fudge, Lilia decided to take a closer look at this girl for herself. For all she knew, the girl could have simply used some tricks to deceive the ninja slime. Although useful, Lilia knew Fudge could be quite a dit sometimes. If someone was going to be her son's partner, then they better be someone who deserved him. In her eyes, Michael was the perfect little boy who had absolutely no flaws and no weaknesses. His partner should have at least one or two of those traits. So, Lilia and Fudge devised a little scenario to determine if Una had good intentions with her son. Despite this being their very first mission as the Michael Club, they had prepared everything they needed for this plan to work accordingly. They had normal club members planted amongst the crowd, acting like a normal bystander. They all had the skill to act like a shadow, so they were perfectly adept at staying out of sight. After a few more minutes, their target finally came into view. Una came out of the magic tower with a smile on her face, as if she had accomplished everything she set out to achieve. That's her, madam, Fudge announced as he caught sight of Una. Lilia didn't waste a second any longer and briskly walked in her direction. With her face completely covered, she was sure that she wouldn't be recognized by anyone in the street. She quickly took a bottle of a strange liquid from one of their club members and held it in her hands. This liquid was a staining solution that would completely ruin any silk or linen clothes. It would be unwashable through any means, making the stain permanent. Lilia recognized Una's dress to be made out of very expensive material, which made her think that the girl was someone materialistic. That would be a complete deal-breaker for her. She didn't want her son to end up with someone that valued him only for his money. She wanted Michael's partner to be like her. She didn't marry Bart because of his money. She married Bart because she loved him for his good qualities. She didn't even know he was a Vanderbilt before they were engaged. Lilia planned to accidentally bump into Una and pour liquid on her dress. If Una freaked out because her expensive dress was ruined, then she was not the right girl for Michael. Una walked down the street with a pep in her step, unaware that the person coming towards her was Lilia. And just as they were about to cross each other, Lilia crossed her legs and purposefully tripped herself to spill the staining liquid onto Una's red dress. The plan successfully worked, with the stain completely visible on the hemline of her dress. Una frowned a little bit. Her favorite dress had been dirted. Oh my, I'm sorry, girl. But just as Lilia was going to say her practice line, she suddenly felt something fall from her dress. A wooden statuette of Michael's complete likeness fell out of her pockets and landed on the gutters by the side of the street. The previous pristine condition of the sculpture was now dirted with mud and grime from the ground. This was not part of the plan. It seemed that as she tripped herself, her beloved Michael, too, had fallen out of her pockets as well. No! Lilia screamed as she fell on the ground and scrambled to get Michael, too. She had been so careful with Michael, too, all this time, ever since Michael gave it to her. She had never let it out of her sight and always brought it with her wherever she went. It made her feel like Michael was always there with her. But now, her little mistake had dirted Michael, too. Just then, she heard something rip. Lilia lifted her head and saw Yuna offer her a ripped piece of her dress. The little girl willingly destroyed her favorite red dress so that Lilia had something to clean Michael, too, with. It still looks good. It just needs a little wipe, Yuna said with a smile. It was at this point that Lilia realized that she had completely misjudged the little girl. She didn't hesitate for a single second as she ripped the hems of her dress to save an unknown person from distress. You would do this for someone you don't even know? Lilia asked her. Yuna tilted her head. Well, it looked like you really treasured that wooden statue. My dress is nothing compared to your priceless memorabilia. Is that your son? She asked her. Experience tales at Empire. Yes, Lilia said as she took the fabric and wiped the dirt away from Michael II's face. When he's with me, I feel like my son is also with me. Ah, that's cute, Yuna said, giggling. You don't think it's weird that a mother is this obsessed with her son? Most people think I'm crazy because I treat this wooden statue as if it were a real person, Lilia said, looking straight into Yuna's eyes. No, I don't think so, the girl answered. It's only natural that a mother cares and loves her son this way. In the future, I hope I can be as loving as you to my children. Lilia looked at Yuna with her jaws dropped, completely stunned at hearing the perfect answer come out of the girl's mouth. Oh, my friends are here. I gotta go. It was nice to meet you, madam. Yuna waved goodbye to Lilia before she jumped onto the bus with Agnes and the rest of her escorts. Now that she was all alone, Fudge ascended from Lilia's shadow and skipped in front of her. What do you think, madam? Isn't she the perfect match for Master? Fudge asked enthusiastically. Fudge, Lilia muttered. She's more than perfect. This is fate. Fate? Fudge asked as he tilted his head. Is it a new nickname for me? Lilia picked up the violet slime and took him into her arms. No, you silly puppy. The partnership of that girl and Michael is ordained by nothing less than the universe itself. What do you mean? Lilia looked at Yuna on the side of the street. She didn't recognize the little girl at first because she had grown up so fast in just a few years. However, Lilia did recognize the female ogre that greeted Yuna with respect. She wouldn't forget that face. That ogre had a permanent frown, red eyes, and a single horn on her forehead. She was none other than Agnes, the famous battle maid of the Montgomery family. And if she was escorting that little girl, then Yuna must be none other than the youngest daughter of the Montgomery family. You didn't tell me her last name was Montgomery, Lilia said as she squeezed Fudge aggressively. BUMF, sorry, madam. I forgot he. But why does her last name matter? Lilia watched as Yuna's bus set off and rode out into the street. She could have stopped them and introduced herself, but Lilia chose not to. She wanted to let fate play out without her intervention. When Michael was a child, I arranged for him to be married to Yuna, Lilia said. Really? Did you already know back then that they would be a perfect match? Fudge asked, amazed at the madam's prescience. No, I just saw her as the youngest daughter of the Montgomery family. The union of the two was purely political, Lilia explained. A political marriage between the two was completely beneficial to all parties. Yuna was the youngest daughter of the Montgomery family, and Michael was the youngest son of the Vanderbilt family. But even though they had a direct lineage to their respective families, they weren't exactly the foremost candidate for the succession of their inheritance. Lilia wanted to secure Michael's future. She knew from the start that Michael wouldn't be given much in his inheritance, especially since Eyes Vanderbilt had a lot of sons and daughters who were up to inherit the wealth. So, she thought that if she could connect with the Montgomery family, Eyes Vanderbilt would favor Michael as an important member of his family, and therefore be given a lot more money from the inheritance. Yuna's parents also accepted this agreement because they wanted Yuna to be favored by her grandmother. The Vanderbilts had money. The Montgomerys had connections. By tying the knot, they would solidify their connections with each other and allow them to strengthen their claim to their family's legacy. Does that mean they're engaged already? We don't have to do anything, and she'll become my master as well. Fudge asked, excitement filling his jiggly body. Lilia sighed in disappointment. Unfortunately, the engagement is not official. What? Why not? When Michael showed his talents in the mystic arts as well as in his business, Bard and I decided that he didn't need the Vanderbilt wealth any longer. Michael could take care of himself, even without his grandfather's help. Coincidentally, Una also showed off her talent in the physical arts as well as her diplomatic relations. She became favored by her grandmother through her smarts alone. They both turned out to be geniuses in their own right, which meant that they didn't need a political marriage to boost their value. So, I talked with her parents, and we mutually decided to call off the engagement. Fudge listened to Lilia's story and couldn't help but feel as if it was a waste. They look so perfect for each other, he said. If they were still engaged, then we would only have to wait until they're at the right age, and they could be married. Find adventures at Empire. Can you still talk with her parents and arrange another marriage for them? Lilia shook her head with a smile. We don't need to. Don't you see? Even the universe itself wants to get the two of them together. We just need to let the two of them meet, and they will figure out on their own that they are made for each other. If they had made another engagement agreement behind their backs, it could have the complete opposite reaction they want. Michael valued his independence, so he wouldn't react positively to an engagement he didn't agree with. But that could take a long time, Fudge complained. Fudge wanted to be pet by Una and Michael all the time. Foo-foo. Lilia chuckled with a mischievous smile. Of course, we can also push the two of them from the shadows. That's why we have our little club, right? Fudge picked up on Lilia's words. Yes, yes, madam, you are so very right. Master won't know it, but he has already fallen right into our plans. Achoo. Michael sneezed. Is someone talking about me? Boss, is there something wrong? Lolo asked, stopping his progress report. No, keep going. Lolo nodded and began to inform Michael about the new additions to their territory. Ever since the nation of Reborn became front-page headlines, almost every demi-human living in the King's region had heard about the paradise in the parched lands. So, they came to check out the rumors. And once they saw everything that the nation had to offer, they didn't hesitate any longer and signed up to become a citizen of Reborn. This doubled their numbers overnight, turning their small village into a territory with 10,000 demi-human inhabitants. Although this had doubled the workload to maintain the nation, it didn't matter in the end because the workforce had expanded with a new surplus of citizens that had just recently awakened their talents. Kong didn't even have to return to the nation to supervise the construction of new houses. There were plenty of engineered demi-humans who could do the work without him, which was good because Michael expected to see more demi-humans joining them in the near future. But what he didn't expect was that even humans wanted to become citizens of their nation. There are about 100 or so humans who have knocked on our doors and inquired about how they could get citizenship, Lolo explained. After the nation of Reborn was publicized all over the newspapers, many curious and inquisitive people began traveling to the parched lands in search of the place called Paradise in the desert. Conveniently for them, there was already a flat concrete road that led directly to the nation of Reborn from Kingsbridge City. Most of them wanted to disprove the unbelievable stories in the papers, but once they arrived, all the rumors quickly became truths. It seemed that the nation of Reborn truly was the place where stars landed at night. Of course, what they really saw was just the light bulbs lit up on every house in the nation as well as the lamps on the streets. This became quite an experience to see. Most people visit the nation of Reborn just to see this amazing sight during the night. And while they visited, they slowly fell in love with everything that Michael built in the desolate desert. If they want to join, then we must accept them, right? Lolo smiled. Yes, boss. These humans have all integrated quite well with us demi-humans, treating us with no discrimination and even more admiration. You should see how much they cheer at the baseball games, boss. They even beat the Lamias in shouting. That's good. Michael nodded in satisfaction. I want our nation to be a place where anyone can feel at home. It was always his intention to eventually have humans and demi-humans in his nation. However, he thought that achieving a peaceful society between the two races would be a little bit more difficult to achieve. He thought it would take a bit more time to integrate the two into one nation. But he was quickly proven wrong. Ever since the Rebornians showed themselves along the King's region, the public perception of demi-humans had quickly gone up. They were no longer considered as a group lesser than humans. The fact that it was demi-humans who sold Reborn products and provided Reborn services also helped a lot in dispelling any negative connotations about demi-humans. Everyone loved the Reborn taxi service for its cheap and easy way of commuting over large distances in the King's region. And every time they bought a ticket, they would be faced with a demi-human attendant and driver. Soon, the demi-humans became associated with being loyal, talented, and hardworking people who gave them amazing products and services. That was how plenty of humans found themselves at peace and happy in the nation of Reborn. Explore more at Empire. Prepare for more humans to migrate to our nation, Michael said to Lolo. I'll ask Castell if there's any of our human Reborn workers who want to move to our nation and work here full-time. Michael planned to have his parents move here once everything settled down, so it was a good idea to have more humans in the nation so that they wouldn't feel too out of place. He soon descended into his own shadow and reappeared in Kingsbridge City, right inside Castell's office. The hardworking Reborn CEO quickly dropped everything she was doing and greeted Michael. Hello, young master. To what do I owe the pleasure? She asked, bowing to him. Michael explained his proposal about having human workers migrate to the nation of Reborn. Not only would they be able to take their families with them, but they would also awaken their latent talent once they were a full citizen of their nation. That is an interesting idea, young master. I'm sure that a lot of them would take this chance in a heartbeat. Most of the human workers in the Reborn company were people who only rented their house in the city, which made their expenses every month bigger than what they would like. But if they became a citizen of Reborn, they would be able to build their own house without paying a single coin. Soon after, Castell sent out a company-wide letter that described exactly what kind of benefits they would get once they migrated to the parched lands. The prospect of living in the paradise-like world of the Reborn nation was already a tempting offer for most of them. But the thing that truly pushed people to sign up for this proposal was the fact that they could bring their families with them to Reborn. This meant that their sons, daughters, and even their wives would have their talent awakened free of charge. Their child would have a chance to become a mage or a swordsman. After hearing the positive reception from the Reborn workers, Michael returned to the parched lands within a blink of an eye, ascending from the shadow in the corner of his house. Lolo had been waiting patiently for Michael to return and greeted him with a respectful bow. I have some free time tomorrow, he told Lolo. Tell all of our new citizens to come to my house for their talent awakening. It was early in the morning, with the clock tower yet to strike its bell, but there was already a large group of the new citizens, both human and demi-human, lining up outside of Michael's house. They waited patiently for their turn to get their talents awakened. Nothing unusual happened with the demi-humans he awakened. Their talents, skills, and evolution paths weren't all that different from what he saw from the others he awakened. However, when he started to awaken the talents of humans, he came across a strange new possibility. He faced a middle-aged woman who had been working as a town crier in the Reborn offices. So, you already have your talent awakened? He asked her. Yes, she answered. My D-class talent was called Shouting Voice, allowing me to be the announcer for Reborn products. Even though she already had a talent, his superior golden nose skill told him that she still had the potential to awaken a good talent. Michael had a single question in his mind. Could he awaken someone who already had a talent awakening? Michael knew that he could awaken the talent of someone who hasn't had their awakening yet. Castell, for example, missed her timing and was unable to awaken hers, forever closing the door to her latent skills. That was until she met Michael, who had the supreme skill to do the impossible. This happened quite frequently because the fee to awaken a talent was quite exorbitant for struggling families to afford. That was why many people failed to awaken at 10 years old. He had been using his supreme skill for demi-humans this whole time, who weren't even supposed to have a talent in the first place. So, Michael had yet to try it on to a human who already had a talent. Hey ChatJK3, is this possible? Yes, Michael. It is possible to awaken the talent of someone who already had a talent awakened. Michael couldn't believe it. First of all, how is that possible? Second of all, do all humans have the capacity to awaken a second time? And thirdly, why didn't you tell me this any sooner? To answer your questions, 1. This became possible only after the software was upgraded to the current version. 2. All humans can awaken a second time as long as there is improvement that the system can find. 3. You didn't ask. Michael was so astonished by this that he ignored ChatJK3's snarky remark. He immediately inspected the middle-aged woman using his supreme skill and found that he could improve her talent. Current talent: C-class shouting voice. Potential upgraded talent: A-class angelic voice. It seemed that upgrading a human talent was like the evolution of a demi-human. Since ChatJK3 could change evolution paths, it could also improve talents. Enjoy more content from my virtual library empire. Michael looked at the middle-aged woman and asked her, "Do you have a hobby of singing?" She meekly nodded, embarrassed about telling him her dreams of becoming a famous singer in all the lands. "Well, you're in luck," Michael said to her. "It turns out you have what it takes to be our country's next top singer." He raised his hand and activated his supreme skill. The middle-aged woman was suddenly enveloped in a blinding light that persisted for a few seconds before fading away. Downloading singing lessons complete. The woman looked at her hands, feeling a sense of confidence in herself that she had never felt before. "Thank you, hon." The woman was so surprised by the change in her voice that she startled herself. She suddenly realized that she could belt out melodies and rhythms that she couldn't have done before. With the knowledge imparted by ChatJK3, the woman could become one of the best singers even in his previous world. "Thank you, Sir Michael. But I'm sorry that I won't be useful in our country," the woman said dejectedly. "Who said that? You're plenty useful for our country." Michael immediately replied, "Having performers like her with tremendous singing abilities would increase the enjoyability of the festivals they hold in the nation now and in the future." He always thought that they lacked more entertainment varieties in their festivals. Aside from baseball games, drinking games, and the fireworks show, the nation of Reborn didn't have anything else that the citizens could amuse themselves with. But with the new influx of citizens, he saw that there were more and more talents that didn't have anything to do with production or physical ability. Some humans and demi-humans had the talent to play instruments, sing songs, and dance with great fervor and rhythm. Most of these people would find it hard to get a stable job in any other territory, but in the nation of Reborn, it was a very welcome talent that was just as essential as the engineers and the farmers. After all, Michael was the only one who knew the possibilities that the arts could take them. Back in his previous world, K-pop idols were worshipped by millions and millions of fans across the globe. Even though they used a different language, people still sang their lyrics and danced their difficult moves. Even he was caught up in the K-pop fever back in his previous life. Aside from watching anime, Michael was also a fan of listening to K-pop songs. There was this one solo K-pop idol who he was a massive fan of. She was great in both singing and dancing, and was considered to be the jewel of the night for her ability to shine brighter than the stars while singing her songs. She was one of the reasons why he would even get out of the house. He wanted to go to her concerts and catch a glimpse of her in real life. Of course, she was considered one of the most beautiful women in the world, so his intention to see her in concerts wasn't just to listen to her sing. She was also the reason why he got into online chess. She said in an interview that she was quite obsessed with the game, and it inspired him to play chess as well. Michael knew that he was not the only one who admired her greatly. Back in his previous life, it seemed that the whole world admired her as well. That was the real potential of art talents. Michael thought that the Rebornians with these kinds of talents could also become like the K-pop idols in his previous life, conquering the world through their music and their dancing. This world still undervalued talents that weren't productive, but Michael believed that he could change that. Of course, before he could change the world, he had to start in his nation. So, he instructed Lolo to give these talents a way to showcase their skills, something like another festival. After all, they had just brought in a whole lot of new citizens, so it was only appropriate to welcome them at the celebration. With the help of some of his craftsmen, they were able to make musical instruments like guitars, drum sets, and even a stereo sound system that could broadcast music to the entire nation. Of course, he decided to integrate mithril into those instruments as well. With the materials available in the king's region, it was relatively easy to create musical instruments for everyone that needed it. The guitar was essentially just a hollow block of wood with strings on it, so it was quite easy to make. As for the stereo microphone system, Michael had to ask ChatJK-3 to help him figure out the electronics hidden inside that could amplify the sound. After making the instruments, he gathered all of the talented artists and gave them their respective artifacts. Yes, artifacts. After all, Michael fitted all of the musical instruments with mithril stones, which further enhanced the talents of those using them. If the farmers had farming equipment artifacts and the engineers had ruler artifacts, then these people would have instrumental artifacts. After all, the skills they obtained from their talents were very similar to a spell, so the enhancement effect of a mithril artifact was still applicable. This actually made Michael curious. After all, the effects of mithril were very obvious to the farmers who used it. Their respective crops would grow faster and much more plentiful when using an artifact. But what would be the effects of an instrument artifact? Michael didn't know. He guessed that it would just be a little louder than normal. To test it out, Michael picked out one of the human guitarists he just awakened and asked him to try out his new musical artifact. "You know how to play a song, right?" he asked him. "Yes, Sir Michael. When you awakened me, I was also endowed with the knowledge to play the guitar," the man answered. Michael wanted to see what kind of effects the mithril could have on other people, so he also invited a variety of demi-humans to witness this experiment. He had a representative from each department in the nation, one from the farming sector, one from the engineering group, and each one from the different species of demi-humans. They all gathered at Michael's house and waited for the guitarist to start performing. "Play any song you'd like," Michael said. The man felt a little bit nervous having a group of people watching him, so he picked out a simple, easygoing chord progression that helped calm him down. Tring! And as soon as the notes bounced around the room, every single one listening to the guitarist started to show a peaceful smile, as if they felt instantly relaxed. Suddenly, Michael heard ChatJK-3's voice ring out inside his head. Calming effect allowed to pass through. "Your health has been increased by 10%. Michael's eyes widened as he saw the notification pass through his eyes. "So that's why I feel so calm and relaxed. I got a 10% boost in my well-being. Is that because of the calming music played by the guitarist?" "Yes." ChatJK-3 answered. "What do you guys feel?" he asked the others. "I feel very calm, sir, like I had just taken a warm bath." "Me too. My headache is suddenly gone as well." It seemed that he was not the only one who was blessed with a bump in health. Everyone who listened to the guitarist's music received the same effects. "Can you try to play another song? I want to see what other effects it could bring," he asked the guitarist. "What would you like to hear, sir?" Michael looked at the farmers and had an idea. "I want a song that will help me concentrate better. That kind of music." The guitarist nodded his head and began to brainstorm in his mind about the proper rhythm and chord progression that could elicit the kind of effect Michael wanted. As he strummed the guitar, the imagery of hard-working Rebornians toiling on the farm filled his mind. Because of that, the music produced from his guitar brought out a unique sound that resonated with and the farmers in the room. Inspiration effect allowed to pass through. "Your agricultural production efficiency has increased by 30%. And the Hobman Key, in charge of being the agricultural chief of staff in their nation, couldn't help but gasp as she felt the mana in her body dancing to the beat and rhythm of the music. It seemed to be in a good mood and allowed and to harness their power for her skills. "Boss, this is amazing," she exclaimed. "If our guitarist plays a song while we're working in the farms, I feel like we can double our harvest for this month." Michael was starting to discover the true potential of musical talents. He began to have the guitarist try other songs, each having a different tempo, rhythm, and intent. One of the songs was directed to the engineers. Your mental capacity has increased by 25%. Whoa, I just solved a problem I've been having about our new construction projects, an engineer said as he listened to the guitarist's technical song. Another song was intended for one of the security centaurs, having a high tempo and exciting rhythm. Your physical piercing power has been increased by 30%. Nay, even a metal wall won't stop me. After experimenting with different songs, Michael found that the intent of the artist itself was crucial in achieving the desired stat increase. If the guitarist played a song with helping farmers in mind, then the effects would follow his intent. Michael also found out that if the music was intended for a small group of listeners, then the stat increase was much greater than if the song was intended for everyone. That was why the health increase was only 10% while the others were much higher. "This is astonishing," Michael said to the guitarist. "And you're not even using your skills yet, right?" The human guitarist shook his head. "No, sir. I'm just playing normally with the guitar artifact. Read Exclusive Adventures and my virtual library empire." He would have never thought that the effects of an artifact would be this pronounced. And this was just one guy playing an instrument. Michael could only imagine what kind of effects a full band of musicians could make in a large stadium. This further led him to believe in the possibilities and potential of musical talents. With the use of an instrumental artifact, they could easily spread their influence to the world. After seeing the effects, Michael immediately started a new department in their nation called the Artist Division, which was made up of all Rebornians who had the talent to become musicians and singers. Their main job was to play their music and inspire all the workers in the nation, increasing everyone's productivity by at least 30%. This was an amazing addition for their budding nation, especially since they had to keep up with all the demand for the products they were selling in the King's region. With their help, it would be much easier to accommodate all the new citizens who joined them recently. They didn't have to worry about failing to produce food for 10,000 people in their nation. The effects of the department were quickly apparent to anyone who listened with their own ears. The Artist Division actually ended up becoming too popular within the nation, with not enough musicians and singers to help the different workers in the jobs. Unfortunately, there weren't a lot of them available here. After all, most people wouldn't earn enough money if they pursued a career in music. The only jobs they would find in Kingsbridge were entertainment in bars and taverns, which didn't pay them a lot. So, there were probably a lot of musically talented people who were forced to work a different job to survive. The human guitarist was proof of that. He told Michael that he used to be homeless and only earned money from selling scraps. But now, he turned out to be one of the most sought-after musicians in their nation. Hopefully, many more would rediscover their talent for music. Michael even arranged for a festival to take place where musicians and artists could show off their talents to everyone. He even made sure to advertise this festival to every territory in the King's region, giving them a reason to finally visit the nation of Reborn. After a week, the preparations for the festival were finally over. Michael saw a large stage in the middle of the plaza, still propped up by metal scaffoldings, which some Rebornians workers used to make some final adjustments to the stage. He had them equip it with large spotlights that shone with different colors, much like the music stages that he saw in his previous life when he went to concerts. Experience more content on my virtual library empire. Of course, he also installed the newly created speakers and microphone system that he created with the Rebornian dwarves. Michael had the guitarist connect his instrument artifact to the amplifier to see if the boosting effects of his sound would still have the same result over the speakers. To his dismay, it seemed that the sounds on the speakers didn't have any effects at all. It just sounded like a normal guitar and was unable to resonate with the mana of those listening to it. I think it's because the speakers count as a new instrument. Maybe if I install a mithril gem into it, then it would work. ChatJK3 were the components that we can change into mithril. His personal AI assistant showed him the blueprints of the speakers and the amplifiers, with some of their internal parts replaced with a complete replica using mithril as its material. The bigger the mithril used, the better the effects it had on the user. That was why most of the artifact weapons and tools were made completely out of mithril. However, since the sound system used electrical components, they couldn't all be replaced with mithril. Thankfully, though, there were plenty of parts that could be changed. Once the sound system was turned into a mithril artifact, Michael was excited to see that the stat effect from the guitarist were broadcasted to the limits of where the sound of the speakers could reach. This meant that anyone who performed on stage would be able to show off their unique songs and their effects to the entire nation of Reborn. Everyone who visited this place would be surprised to find their magic output power suddenly increased by a few percent just because they were listening to the songs on the speakers. Michael was glad he invited Cerberus and the rest of the Magic Tower to partake in this festival. He couldn't wait to see their reactions when they experienced this for themselves. Good work at setting up the stage, everyone. Michael praised all the Rebornians for working hard these past few days. After inspecting the main attraction, Michael went to check in on the rest of the work in the nation. Since they were expecting a lot of visitors this time, everyone had to adjust and renovate their infrastructure to accommodate the large influx of people coming. For example, they had to build a lot of inns and hotels so that their guests would have somewhere to temporarily live in while the festival was ongoing. But even with that, Michael was sure that it wasn't going to be enough to accommodate everyone. So, he visited some of the demi-human housing districts to ask them for a simple favor. "Boss, are you sure that people will want to live here?" the old satyr asked Michael. To solve the housing crisis for the upcoming festival, he suggested to the satyrs that they should turn some of their tree houses into inns and hotels that guests could stay in. Although they were more than willing to do it, the satyrs didn't think that the humans would want to live in a habitat meant for demi-humans. "Trust me," he said to them with a confident smile. "I have a feeling that it will be popular among other humans. It's new and exotic. Anyone would want to try and experience living in this unique house." Michael was basing this off the fact that people in his previous life spent enormous amounts of money traveling to new countries to experience vastly different cultures from their boring old lives. Since people would be traveling all the way to the parched lands for this festival, Michael knew that they would be excited to experience what it was like to live as a demi-human for at least one day. The day of the festival had finally arrived. Streets were completely filled with people coming from all over the King's region, filling the double-path concrete road meant for 4 cars to go through. It was good that they planned for this. Michael instructed Kong and the other engineers to renovate and adjust the roads to accommodate the large number of vehicles entering in and out of their nation. Most of the people that arrived here took the Reborn taxi bus, so the traffic wasn't that congested around the streets of their nation. But for those who were able to afford their own automobile, there was a designated underground parking space where they could leave their vehicle. The main stage area, located at the center of the nation, was closed off to vehicles and could only be accessed by walking. This had 2 purposes. 1, it would prevent traffic at the busiest place in the nation. And 2, it would also force people to explore everything that the nation of Reborn had to offer. It worked. Each person walking the streets of the Nation Center had their heads up, looking at the strange and unique buildings lined up in blocks. If anyone from Michael's previous world saw this, then they would recognize the style and architecture and attribute it to the cities from modern Earth. "Whoa, I can't believe such a beautiful place is hiding in the desert. Look at that. That's a Reborn mall. Let's see what we can buy. Fried chicken? What kind of food is that restaurant serving? I want to try it. But I also want to try that round thing called pizza." Wherever they looked, they would find all sorts of unique services or products that could only be found in this place. The Nation Center was tightly packed with commercial buildings that were designed for the guests to spend as much money as possible even before the festival started. And if people were overwhelmed, then there would always be a Rebornian nearby, ready to assist them with whatever they needed. "Excuse me, do you know where to find good food to eat? My kids are getting hungry." A confused father approached one of the Lamias as he pointed at his 2 children. The Lamia smiled and gave the man a map of the whole nation. "There's a good burger place just past this street," she said. "But I suggest that you visit the Rebornian Hotel right here. It has lodging, a restaurant, and a pool for your kids to enjoy." She pointed the human family to the tall and wide building just on the other side of the street. It looked expensive just from one look alone, especially since the front doors and windows were made out of pure glass. "Miss, what's a pool?" one of the kids asked. "It's kind of like a beach, but indoors," the the Lamia replied. Cool. I want to swim. Mom, Dad, can we go there? The kids clamored to their parents. The mother and father looked at each other, and it was clear from their expression that they were incredibly curious to see this hotel as well. Honey, I think we should buy a room for ourselves, the mother said to the father. Your journey continues on my virtual library empire. With his wife and kids begging for him to do it, the man had no other choice. Miss, where can we park our car while we stay in the hotel? The Lamia smiled. Customers of the inn can have their automobiles parked for them by one of their attendants. This is called a valet service. Oh, and purchasing a room with them gives you a complimentary ticket to the baseball game later today. Baseball? At midday, the stadium erupted in cheers and shouts as the baseball game took off. Not a lot of people even knew there was a stadium just on the outskirts of the nation, much less that there was a game called baseball taking place there. However, they were quickly curious as they heard the raucous cheering from the stadium echoing all over the nation. They began to ask around, and the Rebornians quickly explained the basics of the game. A lot of people were interested and immediately bought a ticket for the next game. The festival hadn't even started yet, but the tourists were already enjoying themselves in the nation of Reborn. Gold coins kept pouring in as every single guest explored the amenities they offered, and some even decided to book a room for an entire week to fully enjoy their experience. Many contemplated moving here entirely. After all, the convenient lifestyle here was much more advanced than castles meant for royalty. For example, as people began filling up the rooms of the inns and hotels in the nation, they began to discover the wonders of electricity. With just a flick of a switch, light would suddenly appear at the top of their room. And with a single push of a button, cold air would blow out of the strange box compartment near the window. Not only that, but they had a magical box that could keep their beer and water as cold as ice. Electricity became such a buzz among the guests that people began to knock on the gates of his house to beg him to have electricity available in their houses. Lolo had to appease them and promise that electricity would be available in the king's region soon. Michael had already been planning on creating a new power plant. It would be located nearer the northern part of the king's region so that it could supply electricity to Kingsbridge City and the rest of the territories there. This would also leave a possibility for the Queen's region to be connected with electricity. But of course, he still had to gain widespread recognition from their locals. Boss, are you busy? Lolo said, knocking on Michael's door. Come in, Michael replied. Is there something wrong with the festival? No, sir. Everything's going fine. I came here for a different reason. Some guests are asking to meet with you personally. Michael stopped walking and looked at Lolo. I'm guessing there's something special with these guests if you're coming to see me. Yes, boss. They say that they're from the Queen's region. Michael raised his eyebrows, intrigued at these new guests that came all the way from the Queen's region. He asked Lolo to bring them in, and he came back a few minutes later with a few individuals behind him. His superior golden nose itched, meaning that he was in the presence of someone who had great potential yet to be awakened. With his enchanted vision, he was able to catch a glimpse of his guests. He noted their snake-like appearance, having flat noses and eyes that slightly bulged out of their heads. Their skin was covered in matte, grayish scales, which didn't look to be in too great of a condition. Boss, these are the guests. They're called Komodos, Lolo said, officially introducing them to Michael. Hello, sir. The Komodos greeted him timidly. After the Komodos saw how advanced everything was in the nation of Reborn, they couldn't help but put Michael up on a pedestal. They thought that whoever created such a paradise for demi-humans was a being that they were not worthy of meeting. The only reason why they took up the courage to meet him was because of their desperation. They wanted to join the nation of Reborn and be part of their community full of amazing and talented demi-humans. Michael observed the Komodos and saw that there were 8 of them, and they all looked alike. Can you introduce yourselves to me? He asked them. The Komodos looked at each other and scrambled to see who would talk first. One male stepped up and faced Michael with a determined look. My name is Jaku, and I'm the eldest of my siblings here. We have originally come from the Queen's region. Jaku began to tell the tale of their family history. It seemed that their living conditions back in their previous place were less than ideal. Because they lost their parents at a very early age, These 8 siblings had no one to support them while growing up. They had to beg on the streets and scavenge for food and scraps just to survive. Despite the hardships, Jaku persevered till adulthood when he could finally work jobs to support his siblings. However, he quickly found out that there were no great prospects for demi-humans like him. Without a proper education, he wasn't given a chance to apply for good jobs. The only thing left for him was low-paying menial work that was barely enough to support his family. "We had enough of that life," Jaku said emotionally. "When our parents were still alive, they told us stories about our ancestors and how we were once part of a great race. They told us we were once dragons. So we came to the parched lands to go back to the roots of our species, to try and rediscover our hidden heritage." Michael was surprised when he heard their story. They were once dragons? Is this true? ChatJK3? Yes, records suggest that there was once a link between the Komodos and the Draconian race. However, there was a sudden break in the bloodline around the same time that the Godforge was destroyed. Komodos. Species. Lizard-human Komodos. Enjoy new tales from my virtual library empire. Difficulty. Element. Fire-Earth. Michael looked back at the Komodos and saw no resemblance to the image of dragons he had in his mind. Although he hadn't seen one in real life, he guessed that they weren't much different from the fantasy depictions of dragons in his previous life. The only similarity they had to a dragon was their scales. That was it. We were ready to search high and low in the desolate desert of the parched lands for an answer. But we are incredibly fortunate to find out that our answer could be found here in your nation. Please take us in as your loyal citizens. We will do anything." Jacob begged, prostrating on the ground. The rest of his siblings kneeled as well, showing their respect and their desperation to Michael. Of course, Michael wouldn't refuse new recruits, especially since his superior golden nose told him that there was at least one talented individual among the Komodos. "Sure, anyone is welcome in our community," Michael said to the Komodos, eliciting a joyous celebration from them. Jaku's eyes showed determination as he faced Michael. "We are ready for our training, Boss Michael. We will walk through fire and break mountains with our fists. We will do anything it takes so that we can evolve into a superior bloodline." Michael tilted his head. "There's no need to do that, though. Just stand still, and I'll awaken your talent." He raised his hand before Jaku could even ask a question. The male Komodo was suddenly enveloped in a blinding light as Michael activated his supreme skill. Jaku. Potential talent. SS Class Lightning Azura Sword Whisperer. Potential skill. 1000 bolts. The user will gain tremendous speed and lightning-fast reaction times as they unsheathe the sword, allowing them to attack multiple times within a fraction of a second. Potential evolution paths. Superior Komodo Snake. A class. This species of Komodos will discard most of their human-like attributes and gain the body of a large serpent that could eventually eat a mountain. The strengths of these species lay in their bodies. The bigger they are, the stronger they become. Ocean Trekker Komodos. B-Class. This species of Komodos gains a pair of wings that allow them superior maneuverability in the air. Their wings are capable of crossing large distances without stopping or taking a break. Dragonborn. Class. This species of Komodos has reached back into the deepest parts of their bloodline and reunited with their ancestors. There is not sufficient information to ascertain the potential of this evolution path. Michael was incredibly curious about the last evolutionary path he found for Jaku. Although the exact benefits of the evolution were unknown, it was exactly what they had been searching for all this time. This path gave them a chance to reconnect with their lost heritage, especially since the name of this evolutionary path had the word dragon in it. He didn't have to ask to know which one Jaku was going to pick. He chose the last option. The light turned brighter and brighter until the whole room was blinded. Only after a few seconds did it finally subside, revealing the new Jaku who had just evolved into a dragonborn. His head looked more rugged, with his head having sharp draconic frills that flowed to the back of his head. His previous small and recessed mouth had now elongated, turning into a snout that seemed to hide sharp canine teeth. To top it all off, he gained 2 horns that curved sideways and a tail like that of a stegosaurus, completing the look that Michael was so familiar with back in his previous life. Jaka now looked like a mix between a dragon and a human, hence Dragonborn. He still had hands and feet that physiologically looked human, but he was now covered with hard, sharp scales that were colored black and dark blue, with a couple of bright blue streaks that looked similar to lightning. Jaka looked at his own hands and couldn't believe the power hidden inside himself. He felt like he was looking at a completely different person, someone who was brimming with might and strength. "Brother? Is that you? You look like a dragon. How is this possible?" Even Jocko himself didn't know. When Michael raised his hand, he suddenly felt a strange power being absorbed into his body, and before he knew it, he had suddenly transformed into this dragon-like being with tail and horns. This phenomenon was none other than evolution. But that didn't make sense. Everyone knew that evolution was something that only happened by chance, with no one ever knowing the requirements for each transformation. Some people hypothesized that evolution would only occur through rigorous training and hard work. He had heard of a very select few who succeeded in evolving that way. But even then, it was not consistent and could only be attributed entirely by chance. Jocko had seen red mankeys in the Queen's region who do nothing but train their bodies all day, every day, but even then, they were unsuccessful in attaining evolution. He had even heard some cases of demi-humans overseas who evolved without any training at all. With such an arbitrary array of examples, most people thought that a complete transformation could only be achieved through pure luck. But when they arrived in the King's region, they saw that the Rebornians had all evolved into an entirely different species. They thought that the Rebornians and their leader had finally cracked the secret method to achieve evolution consistently. They thought that they followed some kind of harsh training regimen to achieve evolution. So, they came into the nation of Reborn with the intent and determination to tough through whatever the Rebornians put them through so that they could also achieve evolution. That was why they were so surprised when Jakku evolved through just thorough contact with Michael, without even breaking a single sweat. "Sir Michael, how did I evolve?" Jakku asked. In response, Michael just shrugged his shoulders and explained his supreme skill. They stared in wonder and amazement at Michael, to which Lolo just chuckled to himself. He must have seen this kind of reaction 10,000 times, but even still, he always liked seeing people realize how amazing their boss was. Okay, who's next? Read exclusive chapters of my virtual library empire. As expected, the 7 remaining Komodos chose to become a Dragonborn Komodo, just like their elder brother. But what truly surprised him was their respective talents. Shiina, the second oldest of the siblings, had a head and body that was a little bit slimmer and more refined than Jakku. This was due to the fact that she was of the female species, but even still, her appearance looked most like a dragon with a human-like body. Shiina, Element Mastery, Unity Element, Magic Purity, 89%, Mana Quantity, Not Applicable, Species, Dragonborn Komodo, Talent, SS Class All-Seeing Artillery, Skills, Critical Eye. This skill allows the user to lock onto a target. Those that are within her line of sight would incur twice the damage of a user's normal attacks. Lesser Unity Gathering, Lesser Unity Defense. He had awakened a sharpshooter. What surprised him the most was that her talent was SS Class, just like Jakku. Michael thought that he had already hit the jackpot with 2 talented individuals awakened, but it seemed that his streak of good luck wasn't over yet. Amisu, the 4th oldest of the siblings, also had an amazing fighting talent, just like her older brother and sister. Amisu, Element Mastery, Unity Element, Magic Purity, 90%, Mana Quantity, Not Applicable, Species, Dragonborn Komodo, Talent, S-Class Graceful Calamity Spearmaster, Skills, Gale Force Momentum. This skill allows the user to increase their momentum for every thrust of a spear, with their power increasing accordingly. Lesser Unity Gathering, Lesser Unity Defense. But perhaps the most surprising of all the siblings was the very youngest, Zion. Zion, Element Mastery, Unity Element, Magic Purity, 91%. Mana quantity, not applicable. Species, Dragonborn Komodo. Talent, SSS class World Breaker, Gauntlet Warrior. Skills, Spacebreaker Punch. This skill allows the user's punches to destroy the very fabric of space to reach their target. Lesser Unity Gathering. Lesser Unity Defense. What the hell are these siblings made out of? How are they all so talented? Michael thought to himself. Of course, he wasn't going to complain since they would all be his allies in the end. However, it was quite unusual to have 4 out of 8 siblings have S-class or greater talents in wielding weapons. One was good at the sword, one at the bow, another at the spear, and the last one used gauntlets. This was perhaps the first time he had gotten so many fighting talents like this. As for the other 4 Dragonborns, they all had a variety of B to A-class talents, which was still quite good compared to the other demi-humans he awakened. This made Michael wonder if their new Dragonborn bloodline had something to do with it. After all, having this many S-class talented individuals was definitely not normal. Among the 10,000 demi-humans he awakened, only they had such high-class potential. The Dragonborn siblings looked at each other with joy and relief painted on their faces. Their lives had changed completely from here on out. And to think, there were a couple of times in their journey when they thought about going back to the Queen's region. After all, they expected nothing but desolateness in the deserts of the parched lands. Their friends and neighbors tried to dissuade them from going, telling them that this was the biggest mistake of their lives. But now their bets have paid off. They had not only restored the pride of their Komodo race, but also gained a permanent home in this paradise. Boss Michael. Jaka faced Michael and kneeled. We pledge our entire lives to you. We will make it our life mission to serve and protect you without fail. Michael waved his hand no. Guys, there's no need to do that. You can just live a comfortable life here in our nation. I can take care of myself. Shiana bowed and curtsied to Michael. My brother is right, Lord Michael. You have given these gifts to us for a reason, and we will use them to become your weapons in spreading your ideas and your vision to the rest of the world. We know that you are more than capable of protecting yourself, but you do not need to sully your hands. That is our purpose. I'm afraid that we'll have to insist on protecting you whether you wanted to or not. Michael scratched his head. It looked like the pure white scales on Shina's dragon body were very indicative of her straightforward personality. He had dealt with these kinds of people before and knew that they wouldn't take no for an answer once they decided on something. You can count on us, sir. Amisu shyly said as she walked closer to Michael. We will feel tremendous guilt if something were to happen to you. If someone tries to do something to you, we will destroy their very soul. Michael blinked, not expecting such passionate and graphic words from the meek green-scaled Amisu. Hee, I'll punch them out, isn't that right, sis? Zion, the youngest with fiery red scales, began to skip and shadowbox the air, reminiscent of the famous boxers in Michael's previous life. But perhaps the youngest Dragonborn became too eager with his actions as he ended up punching the air and accidentally activating his skill, Spacebreaker Punch. Reality itself cracked under Zion's punch, creating an earthquake within the very fabric of space and wreaking havoc on the interior of Michael's house. An invisible prismatic shield appeared around Michael, which saved him and the chair he was sitting on. But as for the rest of the furniture, light bulbs, and electronic appliances, they all incurred a crack on their surface as if a giant fist had punched through them. Silence filled the room. You idiot! Shiana picked up her left shoe and accurately threw it to her half-witted younger brother, hitting him directly on the back of his head and incurring an oversized bulge that seemed to pulsate in pain. Ow, I'm sorry. Jocko clicked his tongue after seeing the mess his younger brother had made. TSK, you have no control, my dear brother. But nice power, though. Another shoe flew through the air, now aimed for the eldest and most matured Dragonborn within the siblings. However, his hand quickly deflected the shoe, saving him from having an ugly bump on his head. Continue your adventure at my virtual library empire. I apologize sincerely for my siblings, Shiana said, trying her best to stay calm after her siblings' mishap. Zion, say you're sorry. Now, Zion, with his hands together, approached Michael and bowed to him apologetically. I'm sorry, bro, Mike. Don't call him bro. Shiina was prepared to rip out her own horns just to have something to throw at her impudent little brother. But then they heard a raucous laughter ring around the room. Ha 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 ha. Michael couldn't help but laugh as he observed the siblings' unique dynamic. Even though their personalities were quite loud and noisy, he didn't mind it even one bit. Even in his previous life, he had lived a quiet life, without many friends or family to spend most of his time with. The only thing he heard in his room was the sound of his PC and air conditioner running 24/7. It was a breath of fresh air to hear such lively interactions from these siblings, which seemed to have livened up the room and made it feel more like a home instead of a house. Haha, it's okay, he said to the siblings. I'm fine with whatever you want to call me. Zion made a bragging face to his sister, which Shiina just shook her head at. You're being too kind to him, Lord Michael. Don't worry, I shall discipline him for you. I'll train the rebelliousness out of him as soon as possible. It is dangerous to have him accidentally activate his skill out of nowhere. Shiina grabbed Zion by his scruff and lifted him in the air, preventing him from running away from her. Speaking of which, ChatJK3, can I impart more skills to them? Having one is fine, but they're all talented so they can have more skills in their repertoire. Unfortunately, that is not possible for the time being. Why? Wasn't I able to impart whatever skill I thought of to the other demi-humans I evolved? Michael even asked them all individually about what kind of skill they wanted to learn, and ChatJK3 was able to synthesize a skill that did exactly what they were all asking for. They cannot use mystical arts and can only learn physical arts. He had ChatJK3 explain to him the distinction between the two, and it seemed that the only difference between them was their application. Mystical arts used mana to empower the outside world, like creating an outward explosion that destroyed a boulder. Physical arts, on the other hand, used mana to empower the inside of an individual, giving them speeds as fast as lightning or defense as durable as a mountain. A simple 2-star mystical art spell called Swift Step conjured a gust of wind that would push an individual to a faster speed. Meanwhile, a similar 2-star physical art spell, also called Swift Step, allowed an individual to reach a faster speed. But it was achieved by imbuing the individual with air mana, changing their molecular composition to give them the physical ability to run as fast as the wind. Although the effects of the two spells were mostly the same, the application and magic theory were vastly different between the two. Does that mean that you can't create physical art spells? This software does not have sufficient knowledge to deconstruct and synthesize physical art spells. This made sense since Michael learned the majority of his spells through the magic library in the magic tower. And since mages and wizards only used mystical art spells, they didn't bother to learn any physical art spells. It is best to personally observe more physical art spells so that the system can learn its magic theory. As expected, ChatJK3 was urging him to get more knowledge so that it could upgrade its software once again. Thankfully, he was already planning on exploring the Queen's region, so he would have a lot of chances to steal more magic theories. Of course, he would also try to recruit more demi-humans while he was there. According to the Dragonborns, the living situation in the Queen's region wasn't that ideal for most demi-humans. Some had to resort to begging in the streets and living in the slums. Is it that bad over there? He asked them. It is for low-ranking demi-humans like we were. I found it hard to find a job because there were a lot of other humans who could do the work the same or even better than us, Jakku explained, creasing his brow ridge as he remembered their living situation. It pains me to know that we still have friends still stuck in that place, Shiina lamented. They don't believe that there's anything to find in the parched lands. So, they settled to live their lives in the Queen's region despite its conditions. Michael nodded his head and understood their dilemma. This was not the first time that one of the Rebornians had expressed their guilt at living good lives in the nation of Reborn, while other demi-humans were suffering in other places in the world. Don't worry, he said to them. I'm planning on going there in the near future to spread my company, so they'll eventually learn about our nation. It will just be a matter of time until everyone can live a comfortable life, just like us. But for now, why don't you all go out and enjoy our festival on your own? See for yourself what you've decided to protect with your own lives. A couple of hours later, the sun was finally on its last legs, leaving a reddish hue on the horizon. By now, most of the people visiting the nation had settled down and found an inn to store their luggage. And, just as he expected, the treehouse hostel prepared by the Satyrs was quite the popular lodging among the people visiting. Those who were lucky enough to book a room of their own only realized how fortunate they were once the darkness descended into the nation and was replaced by the light brought on by the street lamps and the glow coming from each room in every building. Having an elevated view from atop the tree houses truly gave them an otherworldly experience. Whoa, the stars they've descended. It was true. This is truly a paradise on earth. I want to live here forever. Why is this view only for this nation? I would pay all the gold coins I have so that I could have this view in my house. Although this sight was quite normal for Michael, this was quite a rare thing for the people in this world, even for people who saw magic on a regular basis. For example, Cerberus and the other mages and wizards from the magic tower could only look on in stunned silence as they finally stepped foot on the famous nation of Reborn. Is this the 7-star spell constellation manifestation? A wizard asked as he and a couple of other mages floated in the air above the glowing nation. No, there's no magic involved in those lights, a mage answered. It's just reality. Tower Master, how is this possible? They asked Cerberus. But the only thing that the white-bearded old man could answer was, Michael. And that was enough of an explanation. It wasn't just the new magic-less inventions that impressed the mages and everyone who visited the nation of Reborn. It was the lavishness in everything here. All sharp-eyed individuals noticed that one of the rarest and most sought-after materials in the world, Damascus steel, was so common in this place that every building and structure was made out of it. Even the garbage cans on every street were lined with Damascus, as if littering was such a grave problem. Stay connected through my virtual library empire. Even the Dwarven kingdom wasn't so wasteful. The production efficiency of this nation truly was something to be amazed at. It would be a lie to say that the mages didn't feel envious of the Rebornians, even more so when they found out that every single one of them had a mithril artifact of their own. I thought mithril was supposed to be rare, but they're using it for rakes. Tower Master, please increase my salary. I really want a mithril wand of my own. They could order a wand artifact from the Rebornians, but it cost a hefty amount of gold coins because each one was customized for each person. At this point, I want to cut ties with the magic tower and just become a Rebornian, the mage said, half joking and half telling the truth. Stop complaining, Cerberus scolded them. I thought we were supposed to be cut off from all worldly desires. His words were suddenly cut off when the loudspeakers of the stage suddenly emitted a crackling sound. A few seconds after that, a single strum of a guitar was broadcast all over the nation. As soon as the first notes were transmitted over the mithril speaker artifacts, a sense of peace and serenity washed over everyone in the nation of Reborn. Wherever they were, they stopped whatever they were doing and looked toward the source of the sound, stunned at the strange music playing on the stage. It seemed to make their body pulsate on the beat and rhythm of the music. But it wasn't just because it was loud. It was because the very music was infused with elemental mana that resonated with everyone who listened. Curious as to where this strange phenomenon came from, everyone slowly started to make their way to the center stage, where lights and music were pointed towards one man who sat on a stool and played a guitar. With each strum, people felt more and more relaxed, as if their very soul was healing. You have gained a 10% increase in your mana circulation. Of course, what everyone was feeling was their mana getting fixed through the boost stat effect of the guitarist. Any living being had elemental mana in their bodies, and usually the circulation of mana in their bodies corresponded directly to their ability to wield mana. This was essentially what mana purity was all about. The more pure mana they circulate in their bodies, the more magically adept a person was. Of course, because of improper technique, physical limitations, and other such factors, not a lot of people could even reach an 80% threshold of mana purity. And of course, since no one was perfect, no one will ever reach 100% mana purity. Michael was the only one who came close with 99.99%. But now, as people listened to the sounds on stage, the mana in their bodies was starting to move to the rhythm and beat of the music, allowing people to reach higher purity in mana, with some even reaching a 10% increase. They subconsciously began feeling like they were getting rejuvenated, unaware that their mana circulation improved drastically, which improved their overall health as a side effect. Of course, normal people had no idea about what was happening in their bodies, so they simply attributed their happy state to nothing more than enjoying the music. But some magically adept people, like the mages of the Magic Tower, knew exactly what was happening to their bodies. My mana, it's moving on its own. I feel hot. The mana is increasing the efficiency of my spells. Tower Master, is this what I think it is? They all looked at the white-bearded old man whose eyes were closed as he concentrated on his body. Even as talented as he was, Cerberus still only had an 89% mana purity. Of course, he still had other talents that made up for this weakness. But still, he tried every way possible to try and increase it by even just 1%. Alas, that was the limit of his physical body. However, as the musical sounds reached his ears, his mana began to move and rearrange themselves more efficiently. 89%, 90%, 91%. His mana purity increased by 2%. He didn't know if he should feel happy or not. His years of effort and experiments yielded nothing in this regard. Yet, just one single song from a Rebornian musician was able to do what even his magic couldn't. Increase it by 2%. Oh, Michael, Cerberus muttered to himself. He couldn't help but feel as if it was a waste that Michael refused to join the Guild of Arcana. If he had, then he would have probably become an honorary Mystic Master at this point. Michael may not have the power and magic required to become a master of the mystic arts, but he certainly made enough improvements in the advancement of magic by leaps and bounds through his inventions alone. Mithril was a large aspect of this. Everyone thought that this material was nothing but a relic of the past. But who would have thought that someone in the desolate desert would rediscover it and use it in ways no one had ever thought of before? Cerberus and the mages weren't the only ones who were surprised by the effects of Rebornian musicians. There was one certain female ogre in the crowd, with a permanent frown on her face and a single horn on her forehead, who watched the performance on the stage just like the thousands of people here. She was Agnes, the famous battle maid of the Montgomery family. Unlike most people, she was able to ascertain the true effects of the music on her body. As someone adept in physical arts, her entire body was always enshrouded with mana that allowed her to have enhanced physical capabilities indefinitely. This was just one of the basics of being a physical arts user. But as she listened to the music, she suddenly felt her muscles contracting, her skin tightening, and her bones hardening to an even greater extent than she intended. Her 1-star, physical hardening spell had somehow turned into a 2-star spell even without her intervention. She couldn't believe it. It seemed as if she was still underestimating this nation of Reborn, even now. Case in point, another musician took the stage after the guitarist's performance had ended. This time, it was a drummer who began to play a high-tempo beat that made everyone subconsciously tap their feet on the ground in unison. His music pumped up their adrenaline, making them more excited. Upon seeing this, Agnes couldn't help but stare in stunned silence as she began to realize all the true potential of the nation of Reborn. She imagined an army of Rebornians marching in a flat field towards another army. Their enemy had the superior numbers against them, but even still, the Rebornians confidently marched forward without stopping. Just then, a loud drumming sound erupted from behind the Rebornians' backline. Those were musicians, whose only role on the battlefield was to play music and increase their army's power twofold. As the music played, the Rebornians felt their adrenaline pump up to the max, with their magic circulating as fast as their blood. The Rebornian army increased their power by an entire magnitude, giving them overwhelming strength to completely crush the superior numbers of their enemy. With musicians, the Rebornian army could become one of the most feared living beings on the planet. As part of a diplomat family, Agnes was glad that the nation of Reborn showed no signs of becoming an aggressive territory. As the celebrations continued, it couldn't be helped that some people ended up drinking too much alcohol that they ended up drunk out of their minds. It didn't help that there were a lot of dwarves in the taverns, and chugging beer like it was water. But of course, they were dwarves. Their constitution was much higher than other species, which meant that they could have a large intake of alcohol and still not be drunk at the end of the night. However, due to the merry atmosphere in the bar, some ended up getting carried away and drinking as much as the dwarves. A middle-aged dog folk, who was half man and half canine, was one such unlucky fellow. He wasn't a Rebornian, so he wasn't familiar with the ways of the dwarves. So, when they made a bet against him on who could finish the most cups of beer in under an hour, he quickly agreed. They promised him a kilo of Damascus steel if he won. Unfortunately, as everyone expected, he ended up losing the bet and having nothing but empty pockets and a body too drunk to even walk properly. He stumbled around the busy streets of the nation, almost tripping himself on the curb. His inebriation seemed to have made him a little bit aggressive in his actions, causing him to react wildly as an old satyr accidentally bumped into him. "Watch where you're going," the dogfolk said, shoving the old satyr to the ground. He was so drunk and frustrated about his loss that he ended up using his innate skill, conjuring a huge gust of wind to push the old satyr with force equal to that of a tornado. But as the wind was about to hit the old satyr, an invisible prismatic shield appeared around him, dispelling the force into nothingness. The aggressive air mana seemed to be negated by the elements of the prismatic shield immediately upon contact. This was the lesser unity defense skill that all Rebornians were blessed with. Each of them had an almost indestructible shield that protected them from any magic spell. This skill was always active and needed no conscious thought from the Rebornians, acting as a guardian angel for all of them. "What? That's impossible," the dogfolk said, slurring his words. He tried to use his skill again, this time with a conscious thought to use much more force than before. But it ended with the same result. The old satyr was protected by his prismatic shield, leaving him unharmed. It was at this point that a lot of people had noticed the commotion, with a lot of the tourists whispering in hushed voices and pointing at the drunk dogfolk harassing the old satyr. "Watch all looking at." Huh. None of them could come to aid. Most of them were normal people with no way to subdue an aggressive and drunk dogfolk who was clearly ready to throw magic spells at anyone that dared to come close to him. "HM, what's happening over there, bro?" Meanwhile, Zion and the rest of his siblings were just walking leisurely in the streets when they suddenly heard a commotion in front of them. And judging from the crowd slowly gathering in the area, they knew something was up. "Someone needs our help," Shianus said, with her eyes peering through the crowd and seeing the situation clearer than anybody else. "I'll deal with this," Zion said as he walked leisurely through the crowd. His attitude was lax, with his hands on his head and his tail wagging back and forth like a dog about to get a treat. "Hey man, you know how to box?" Zion asked. The drunkard looked at Zion and snarled at him. The young Dragonborn's presence seemed to have unnerved the dogfolk, subconsciously feeling a sense of inferiority compared to him. "What do you want?" Zoan had a big smile on his face as he approached the drunk dogfolk. He had been itching to try out the boxing techniques and lessons that were imparted in his brain upon his awakening. And now, this drunkard gave him a chance. He began to jump and skip, raising both his hands next to his chin like a boxer. "Get out of here," the drunkard said, firing wind spear spell to Zion. The young Dragonborn ducked and weaved through the sharp, solidified gust of air. Within just a fraction of a second, he had reached melee range of his target, all because of his footwork. "Don't use too much force," Jocko warned his younger brother. Since the dogfolk had no unity defense skill, he would be very vulnerable against Zion's spacebreaker punch. "You worry too much, bro," Zion replied, with the confidence to look back at his brother while he was up close and personal with the drunkard. Of course, the dogfolk took advantage and wildly swung his arm toward Zion. But Zion just leaned back and let the punch almost graze his chin. The drunkard, missing his punch, ended up out of balance and leaning on just one leg to stay upright. Zion smiled and began to send punch after punch, with speed and ferocity that seemed to almost blur his hands. Most people felt sorry for the drunkard for being beaten to such an extent, but then they realized that Zion's punches never even touched the dogfolk in the first place. His punches hit nothing but the air, just a few inches above the dogfolk's body. Zion knew he didn't have to actually hit the guy. The air brought on from his punches was enough to tip the drunkard's balance, letting him fall face first into the ground. Huh, what do you think about that, bro? I didn't hit him a single time, he bragged to his siblings. Meh, Jocko said disappointedly. You know, you didn't have to do all that, Shiana said, crossing her arms. It was cool. Amissa gave her little brother a thumbs up. The crowd began to clap their hands for Zion, applauding him for taking care of the situation. Among them was Agnes, whose eyes widened as she realized what she had just seen. Angie's gazed at the Dragonborns with a stupefied look on her face. She had never seen such striking scales from a demi-human before. Not only that, but their frills made them look very similar to the draconian race that dominated the world a couple of times throughout history. As she watched the young red-scale Dragonborn play with the drunken dogfolk, she saw the overflowing natural strength and talent he had in the physical arts. The Dragonborn was clearly a novice, with his moves lacking efficiency and control, but his strength and power were clearly on par with veterans. She knew talent when she saw one. Agnes wouldn't admit to this, but she was considered to be one of the best physical fighters in the entire continent. She was the reason why Yuna's parents allowed her to travel so far from their home. So, when she admitted that someone was more talented than she was, it was the truth. Read new adventures in my virtual library empire. Only when she heard the familiar banter and clashing personalities of the Dragonborns did she finally recognize the Komodo siblings. It was a jaw-dropping realization, as she couldn't reconcile the strong and overflowing talent of the Dragonborns to the meek and shy temperament of the Komodos. The difference was like night and day. They had their heads up and their shoulders straight, full of confidence, a complete departure from when she first met them on the outskirts of the mountain region. Zion, you should have just let your brother do the job. Shiina admonished her little brother. You are still far too impulsive with your actions. Oh, come on. He's the one that started it. As she heard their names, her guess had turned out true, no matter how unbelievable it was. These were the weak Komodos who couldn't even learn a single one-star spell if their life depended on it. During their journey, Agnes had tried and failed to teach the Komodo siblings a couple of physical arts to protect themselves. But unfortunately, the physical limitation of their race prevented them from learning even a single one. It would have taken them years before they could pull it off. But now, judging from the elemental mana gathering at their bodies naturally, she knew that their new bodies were fully capable of mastering even high-star spells if they wanted to. Oh, Miss Agnes, you're here. Shiina was the first to spot the battle maid, and she approached her with a cheerful hug. You're really her, aren't you? You're Shiina, Agnes said, looking up and down at her white, dragonborn body with disbelief. Yup, did you see how strong I was? Zion butted in. It's good to see you. Amissa shyly waved. Agnes looked at the siblings and saw that not one of them was less talented than Zion. They all emanated a kind of strength different from each other, yet equally as strong. What happened to you all? Agnes couldn't help but ask. The Dragonborns showed an excited expression the moment Agnes asked that question. It was as if they were just waiting for the chance to brag to her about Michael. And speaking of the man, looks like we weren't needed after all. The Dragonborns all looked back as they recognized Michael's voice. The 11-year-old boy genius had arrived with the security centaurs behind him. They had heard about the commotion a minute ago and immediately dispatched a few officers, but they still got there too late. Michael slowly approached the old satyr to check up on him. Are you fine? He asked. Of course, boss. He's nothing but a child that got a bit too overzealous in his drinking, the satyr said. Even after he was harassed and assaulted, the satyr didn't take it to heart. Michael was relieved that nothing serious happened. But if things had escalated, he was comforted by the fact that Fudge would have notified him as soon as it happened. He then looked at the man responsible for this incident. The dogfolk was still passed out on the floor, with drool leaking out of his mouth. His cheeks were still red from inebriation even now. "First of all, let's get you sober," Michael said as he raised his hand toward the dogfolk and grabbed at the air. With his supreme skill, mana gathering, he used his mastery over the water mana and grabbed at all the alcoholic liquid in the dogfolk's bloodstream, evaporating it out of his skin. Steam billowed out of the drunkard, immediately turning him sober. The reddishness in his sagging cheeks disappeared as his eyes slowly gained clarity. "Huh, where am I?" The dogfolk looked around and saw everyone looking at him curiously. "I remember drinking, then walking in the streets, and then..." Memories began to resurface in his mind like a collage of pictures. And as he realized what he had done, his head quickly swiveled over to the old satyr before prostrating on the floor. "I'm sorry. I was too drunk to know what I was doing." The satyr waved his hand. "It was nothing. Just try not to drink too much next time." After the incident, the dogfolk voluntarily surrendered himself to the security centaurs, who took him to jail for his crimes. "Bro Mike, you should have seen me punch that guy," Zion bragged. "Although a hit brash, my brother did end up neutralizing the situation," Shiana reported. "Oh, Boss Michael, have you met our benefactor?" Jaka finally introduced Agnes to Michael, with the two looking at each other curiously. Even though they'd never met, Michael felt as if Agnes was looking at him as if she knew him already. "I don't believe we've met," Michael said, offering his hand. Meanwhile, Agnes just stared at Michael. Perhaps seeing the Komodos transform into dragon-like creatures was not the biggest surprise she had seen that night. It was witnessing Michael manipulate the dogfolk's very own blood to disintegrate the inebriation out of his very insides. If she were to be completely honest, it was a little bit terrifying to see the ease with which he did that. If he could do that to someone, then nothing could prevent him from simply stopping someone's heart by depriving it of blood. Michael looked at Agnes and saw the weird expression on her face. "Do I know her or something? Why is she looking at me like she knows me?" "I apologize for my behavior," Agnes said after realizing she had been staring at his face for a few seconds. "I'm Agnes, a female ogre, and I serve as the attendant of the Montgomery family." Michael heard that last name before. According to Cerberus, they were one of the families that were well established in the Queen's region. He even said that it would do Michael good if he allied with one of them. He didn't think he would meet them so soon. "Welcome to our nation," he said to Agnes. "I am Michael Vanderbilt." The two shook hands, with Michael noting her solid physical strength just from her grip alone. Analyzing magic. Magic theory acquired. Tribulation skin hardening. Physical arts. Earth and fire element. This magic allows the user to achieve an enhanced defense. Due to the combination of earth and fire mana, this spell gets stronger the more damage the user incurs. Michael was glad that he was widening the selection of physical arts in his repertoire. But if he wanted to synthesize spells, then he needed a lot more. A library's worth more. Aren't the Montgomerys a diplomatic family famous for their connections? Maybe I can ask them where I could learn a lot of physical art spells in the Queen's region, Michael thought to himself. "Are you liking our nation so far?" he asked her. It was important to know how his nation fared compared to the other territories in the Queen's region if he wanted to compete there. Agnes looked around the streets, observing the lights and festivities all around. "I am a knight who knows nothing but fighting, but I am sure that everything you have shown me here will blow away everyone in the Queen's region," she said truthfully. Michael nodded, proud of what he and his allies had achieved this past year. "By the way, what brings you here?" he asked her. Agnes opened her mouth to say something, when all of a sudden, the speakers posted all over the streets suddenly emitted a crackling sound. CCCRRKKK. Someone was on stage. Someone other than a Rebornian was about to perform a song. This was part of the events in the music festival. Since this whole thing was intended to find and nurture musical talents from all over the King's region, Michael invited anyone and everyone who had the musical talent to show off their skills on the stage. If they showed any promise, then they would immediately be recruited into the nation as an official citizen, meaning they would have the privilege of awakening their talent or evolving their bloodline. This time, it seemed that the new singer was a guitarist as a single strum sounded out through the speakers. Michael was going to ignore it, but then the guitarist began to play a serene melody on the stage, something completely different from what he and the others had been hearing the whole night. He whipped his head towards the stage. Discover stories at my virtual library empire. Those chord progressions, those melodies, those heart-wrenching plucking of the strings. It was something familiar to him, something he hadn't heard ever since he had reincarnated into this world. As the instrumental intro continued to play, parts of Michael's memory began resurfacing. These weren't memories of the young, genius son of the Vanderbilt family. It was the memories of the old, jaded Michael who stayed in his room all day with his head stuck on the computer screen. This was the song that saved him from feeling depressed, from feeling listless, and from feeling as if nothing mattered in the world. He thought he would never get to hear this song again. What's going on? ChatJK3. Did you teach this song to one of the musicians? They have not learned this song from a system. ChatJK3 answered, Boss, what's wrong? The Dragonborns realized that there was something wrong with Michael. He wasn't acting as the easygoing leader that they had met. He looked emotional. He looked pained. Michael ignored everybody and slowly made his way to the stage. His steps quickened as the song progressed, nearing the end of its intro. I am with you through the moon. The angelic voice of a woman spread all over the nation, catching the attention of everyone listening. They all turned towards the singer on stage, wondering what kind of language she was singing. It sounded alien to them, but even though they couldn't understand her, and her voice didn't have the same effects as the Rebornian musicians that sang before her, there was an intangible quality in her voice that urged them to listen more. What is she singing? I don't know, but it sounds beautiful. Who is that girl? Michael was the only one who understood. That was English. Those were the exact lyrics of his favorite song, with the same cadence, the same tone, and the same emotionality that captured the hearts of millions of people back in his previous life. And that voice, even though it sounded a little bit younger than what he was familiar with, it was still the same voice that had people shouting and cheering for in any concert she performed. This was no mere coincidence. There was something strange going on here. Star-crossed lovers, that's all that matters. Michael's steps got faster and faster until he was fully sprinting towards the center stage. In all our lives, you were the one. With everyone crowding the stage, Michael couldn't see anything. Solidified wind suddenly manifested beneath his soles, allowing him to traverse the air. As he got closer and closer, he saw the black-haired girl in the middle of the stage. The spotlight shone down on her, making her look ethereal under the night, just like how he saw her back in his previous world. Michael stopped in the air, staring eye to eye with Yuna. The only thing he could think about was she reincarnated. And as Yuna looked at the boy floating in front of her, she knew. He was the one the goddess was talking about. He's the reincarnator. Yuna Kim had reincarnated into this world about 1 year later than Michael. She met the goddess when she died and lived the life of a baby for the next 10 years of her life. Just like Michael, she was under the impression that she was the only reincarnator in this world. The goddess only told her to enjoy a comfortable life here and sent her on her merry way into the circle of reincarnation, leaving out the fact that someone had been here before her 1 year earlier. Born as the youngest daughter of the Montgomery family, Yuna completely immersed herself in this new life, forgetting about her life as a K-pop star in her previous life. Just like Michael, she had shown great talent even as early as 5 years old. Because of her background as a dancer in her previous life, her hand-to-eye coordination was excellent enough to allow her to master the way of the rapier much easier than everybody else, earning her the title of a once-in-a-million genius. But she didn't want to spend her new life fighting monsters and training under her master for 15 hours every day. So, she chose to follow in her grandmother's footsteps and become a diplomat, which basically meant that it was her job to make friends through every territory on the continent. She then spent most of her early years absorbing books and learning all the wisdom that her grandmother had to offer. But one day, she suddenly saw a few wizards playing a familiar game with each side having 16 pieces to play with. It was chess. If she wasn't facing a mirror practicing her moves for her concerts, Yuna spent most of her time playing online chess on her phone. After exhausting her body, She would always want to exercise her brain as well by playing rapid chess for hours at a time. Eventually, she became really good at it. She would have never thought she would see chess again in this life. But she didn't think someone from her previous life introduced it to this world. She just thought that another genius had created a similar game by coincidence. After all, she considered this as a parallel Earth with lots of differences, but a few that were the same as with the original Earth. So, she played chess with the mages and was able to beat them every single time. She even made a wager with them to teach her demi-human attendants some magic if they lost against her. Eventually, the mages learned their lesson. They couldn't beat her, and they also spent too much effort teaching the demi-humans simple magic. So, they stopped playing with her. Wanting to empower her attendants and her loyal friends more, she eventually decided to go to the king's region to seek out Cerberus Augendor, who had access to a big collection of spells in his magic library, as well as a penchant for making bad wagers. Before she left, her grandmother approached her and told her about her fiancé, Michael Vanderbilt, the youngest son of the richest family in the world. Of course, she had no intention of following an arrangement that she did not make. Stay tuned for updates on my virtual library empire. Not only that, but she was basically an adult in a child's body. So, she decided to take a peek at her supposed fiancé and make sure that the arrangement with him was broken off before anything serious happened. As she entered the king's region, she saw things that weren't supposed to be in this medieval world at all. The roads were made of concrete, the villages had running water coming out of faucets, and most of all, pavements were filled with automobile cars running throughout the entire region. This was an advancement in technology that wasn't supposed to be here at all, especially in the king's region, which was considered to be the rural part of the continent. She started to suspect something at this point. Someone from her previous life had to have reincarnated as well, and they brought with them the technology from their previous world. She wanted to find out who this mysterious reincarnator was, and the only one who could answer her question was the goddess herself. Upon visiting the church and meeting with the goddess for the second time in this life, the only answer given to her was, "There is only one other reincarnator in this world," she said with a mischievous smile on her face. "And you'll find them where you're already going." Una could only think to herself, the nation of Reborn? She should have known. The name was already a dead giveaway. They clearly influenced the adorable slime, Fudge, from a famous anime, which was coincidentally one of her favorite TV shows of all time. And when she traveled to the parched lands to reach the nation of Reborn, she was even more surprised at how advanced this place was. It looked more like a modern city from a second-world country from her previous life. The sight of light bulbs, air conditioners, refrigerators, and most importantly toilets, almost made her cry from happiness. The convenience and comfort that she could only get from electrical appliances was one of the things she sorely missed from her previous world. It didn't take long before she got her answer as to who this mysterious reincarnator was. It was none other than her supposed fiancé, Michael Vanderbilt. She couldn't believe the coincidence. The only other reincarnator was also her fiancé? Suspicious. It made her think that the goddess had something to do with it, especially with how much she was having fun not saying anything about him to her. She wanted to meet with him, and fortunately, there was a stage already set for her to perform. She borrowed a guitar and started playing one of her most famous songs, one that reached the all-time top rankings on a music website, taking first place for 20 consecutive weeks. And then, he appeared. Just from one look alone, she knew he recognized the song. And from the shock written on his face, she knew that he didn't know there was another reincarnator in this world. Michael stared at Una, speechless, seeing his favorite K-pop idol reincarnated into the same world as he was made him almost lose all functions. Meanwhile, Una finished her song and bowed to the audience. Her experience as a singer showed in this moment, allowing her to gracefully exit the stage without anyone knowing that she was flustered. As she walked off the stage, she looked up at Michael and gestured for him to follow her. Michael floated down and followed her backstage, where they could finally talk alone. She quickly turned around, leaning forward with her hands on her back. "Are you from my old world?" Una asked him in English. "She is asking you a question, Michael." Only when ChatJK 3 rang out in his head, did he finally break out of his stupor. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just confused. You're Unikim? He asked, still trying to reconcile the image of the K-pop idol to the girl she was now. Una shook her head. No, I'm a Montgomery now. The Unikim you mentioned is dead. Michael looked at her and only now realized something. If she reincarnated into this world the same as he did, then that could only mean that she died in their previous world. And he knew better than to ask for the circumstances of her death. But there was something that he found weird, though. Even though she reincarnated, her face still looked the same as her face before, only younger. If she was older, then he would have thought she had somehow transported herself to this world without dying. Meanwhile, he gained a new body and a new face completely different from his old one. Is this because my death is accidental? Michael asked ChatJK3, but his personal AI assistant had no answer. I love what you've done with this place, Eunice said, looking at the modern buildings around them. I would have also wanted to make electricity, but I don't know anything about that. Michael was the same as her. He knew nothing about the mechanics of how an automobile or a toilet worked. It was all thanks to ChatJK3. I had help, he replied to her. Eunice stopped walking and looked back at him. Probably a gift from the goddess, right? I have one myself too, but it's more focused on fighting. Sometimes it feels like too much of a cheat, you know. Yeah, I understand what you feel, Michael said, smiling. It was refreshing to talk to someone who knew exactly what he was feeling. No matter how much he loved his parents Lilia and Bart, he couldn't bear to tell them that he had reincarnated from another world. He was afraid that they would think that he wasn't their son, only an alien taking his place. Did you reincarnate as a baby too? He asked her. It was so boring, she complained. I was this close to telling my parents that I could speak just so that I could entertain myself from their reactions. Michael chuckled. He thought of that too. I kept myself busy gathering mana. Una walked up to him and playfully shoved him with her finger. You cheat. My talent lies in physical arts, so I couldn't do anything as a baby. Ugh. I wish the goddess had just given me a talent just like yours. Michael smiled and smugly nodded his head. Yep, the goddess owes me quite a bit, so she had to make my life a lot more comfortable. I was able to make a working shower when I was 5 years old. Una crossed her arms and pouted. I'm so jealous. Oh yeah, and I made some soap. Michael and Una began talking about their experiences in this life, all the hardships and the happiness. Despite being from 2 completely different backgrounds, one being a normal nerdy guy stuck in his room all day, and the other being an extroverted K-pop idol worshipped by millions, Michael didn't feel awkward talking to her at all. I guess that's the reason why she's beloved by all. She's really easy to talk to, Michael thought to himself. Find your next read on my virtual library empire. You have to make ice cream, Una said, almost begging Michael. Please, you have to. It's your responsibility as the only one who could make it. I'm planning to, he said, gently appeasing her. Hey, no making fun of me. It's been living in a medieval world for too long, and you've been living quite a comfortable life here in your nation, she said, eyeing him down. That's why I'm planning on expanding my company to the Queen's region, he explained to her. I want to start selling faucets, concrete, and maybe even electricity there. Una's eyes widened. Yes, you should totally do that. You know what? I'll even help you free of charge. Our family is quite famous for our connections, you know? Really, he said, with his eyebrows raising. I haven't been doing nothing these past 10 years, you know? I've been immersing myself in the political landscape of the entire continent to the point that I know all the major players in the territories. I think I can help you. Of course, with a price. Maybe a box full of ice cream would suffice, Eunice said with greed, her eyes already filled with ice cream cones of cookies and cream. Michael thought for a second. That would actually help me a lot. We're just about to finish our preparations on our highway road, leaving for the Queen's region. It was at this point that Una realized something about Michael. You know, you said that it's your cheat skill that does everything for you. But I don't think that had anything to do with the fact that you could ally with the Dwarven Kingdom, she said genuinely. Everything I've learned about the dwarves tells me that they don't care about material things. Dragons offered them hoards of gold. Elves offer them magic. Humans tried giving both. None of them succeeded. But you alone did. How did you do it? Michael shrugged his shoulders. If I'm being honest, I didn't do anything at all. But Yuna knew that wasn't true. Just the fact that demi-humans were so accepted in every society in the King's region told her that Michael had fostered something that the dwarves liked so much that they were willing to open their doors. No matter how Michael said that he was just a normal guy, Yuna thought differently. As Michael and Yuna walked through the streets of the nation of Reborn, two certain individuals were following them from behind, giggling and whispering to themselves. "Look, madam, you were right. We don't have to do anything, and they would find themselves in each other's company," Fudge said. "Fu, yes. It is good, little Fudge. Even if they're just friends for now, we'll make sure that it can develop into something more," Lilia said mischievously as she held Fudge in her hands. Meanwhile, Yuna and Michael continued their conversations about their plans for the future. At first, Michael thought he would be too starstruck to even stand near the Unikim. But he was far too relieved at talking to a fellow Earthling that he consciously tried to ignore the fact that he was talking to a person he and millions of other people called a goddess of dancing and singing. It also helped that Yuna didn't mention anything about her past life. All she talked about was her life as the youngest daughter of the Montgomery family. "You just turned 10 years old. That means you must have just had your talent awakening," he asked her. "I did. Before I arrived here, I visited the church in Kingsbridge City where I met the goddess again. She was the one who told me that there was another reincarnator in this world, though she didn't tell me who it was." Michael nodded. He knew that the goddess could be quite a joker at times. "Can I ask about your talent?" he asked her cautiously. If he was talking to Yuna Kim, he wouldn't be asking such an intrusive question. Heck, he wouldn't even be talking to her. Thankfully, Yuna Montgomery didn't mind. "My talent is called Heavenly Sword Dancer." Yuna suddenly raised her hands and performed her moves, acting as if she had a rapier in her hands. She swiftly swung, pierced, and sliced the air with her movements, which Michael could only describe as something very similar to dancing. And if he wasn't seeing it wrong, it even looked like she incorporated some of her iconic dance moves into her stances. Suddenly, Michael heard a notification ring out in his head. Analyzing talent. Yuna Montgomery. Magic SS class. Element mastery. Water, air. Magic purity. 95%. Mana quantity. 34,592 mana. Talent. SSS class Heavenly Sword Dancer. Realm. 4-star Fencer. Skills. Musical stance. The user's physical stat increase is directly correlated to the fluidity, gracefulness, timing, and expressiveness of their movement. "Where did you learn to train your physical arts?" Michael asked her. Yuna then explained to him about the Order of the Heavenly Knights and how they were the equivalent of the Guild of Arcana for physical arts users. She told him that they were the foremost experts in everything related to spells that were cast inwards rather than outwards. "That's good to know. Maybe I'll visit them in the Queen's region." Michael thought that this was a good goal to set because he needed a lot of physical art spells so that ChatJK3 could improve its software enough to synthesize new and customized physical art spells at will. It would be great if they had a magic library. Michael thought to himself. He could already hear ChatJK3 salivating at the thought. "I did no such thing." ChatJK3 retorted. Michael, are you listening?" Yuna said, a bit upset that he hadn't been listening to her. "Sorry, I was thinking about my plans in the Queen's region," he said truthfully. Yuna walked in front of him and stopped him in his tracks. "Why don't you tell me? Maybe I can help you. You know about our plans to open the highway to the Queen's region from the Dwarven Kingdom, right? We need somewhere good to place our headquarters, somewhere that can connect to a lot of other places. This was a vital decision. For example, creating their headquarters at Kingsbridge City allowed them to be in the center of everything in the King's region, allowing for easy expansion for their business. However, territories in the Queen's region were a little bit more disjointed, with a lot of isolated territories that weren't connected with each other. There's one good territory that fits your criteria," Yuna said after a long deliberation. "Orcus Town. They're usually a place where a lot of peddlers converge, which makes for a very busy town, business-wise." Michael was elated upon hearing this. But judging from the tone in her voice, he knew there was a but coming. "But Orcus has become somewhat of a ghost town these days, Eunice said, her eyes downcast as she reminisced about what she saw firsthand. Elaborate, Michael asked, intrigued. What was once a prosperous town filled with both human and demi-human citizens has now been turned into a lawless place because of an unfortunate disaster that left them in a time of famine and drought. They had already asked for help from the Order of Heavenly Knights, but because of the distance and rough terrain, it would take them a long time before they would arrive. It was one of my duties to assure the people of Orcus Town that everything would be fine once the knights arrived, but I was already too late. As a future diplomat, it was Yuna's job to solve any conflicts or problems occurring in every territory on the continent, including disaster relief. She was supposed to make sure to relay any help requests from Orcus Town. But once she got there, they asked for none. They had already lost hope. Why did they ask for help from the Order? Why not the Guild of Arcana? Won't mages be a better help? Mages could move boulders and make water out of nothing. If the town needed resources, then a wizard was their friend, not a knight. That's the thing, Eunice said hesitantly. Orcus Town is also famous for one thing: orcs. And because of the famine, the two biggest tribes of orcs started shouting at each other. Orcus Town used to be an extremely popular hotspot for business. It was a place where a lot of companies competed against each other to get a spot in the wet market visited by thousands of people each day. They used to consider it a good marker for a company if they were able to retain a center spot in the market without losing any customers. But because of its proximity to the mountain ranges dividing the Kings and Queens region, they were also subject to a lot of natural disasters, such as landslides and earthquakes. Of course, it took a lot of money and time to renovate and reconstruct any broken establishments in the town, something that not a lot of people thought was worth it. Eventually, people began to leave the town, with the cracks in the roads and buildings no longer getting repaired each time a disaster struck. This led to a further degradation of the town, which forced more and more people to migrate to other places. This continued to escalate until the landslide last year finally destroyed their farms and disrupted the clean river they relied on for fresh water. Because of this, the two orc tribes living near the town were forced to clash against each other in a bid for the few remaining resources available in the area. Thankfully, these two orc tribes didn't use violence against humans or demi-humans in their civil war. They used a unique approach to settle their fight. They tried to assert dominance against each other, just like how gorillas did it, by banging their chests with pride and shouting at each other until either of them admitted that they were the lesser tribe than the other. Because of this, no one in town could sleep properly. Aside from being hungry and thirsty, they also had to deal with the problem of having their ears assaulted by shouts and yelling nonstop throughout the night. Unfortunately, all the posturing that the orcs did ended up scaring away any potential peddlers that could have brought them food and nourishment. It came to a point where only knights could solve this problem. They would either force the two orc tribes to reconcile or force them to migrate to another location. If worst comes to worst, then Kruger, their fellow orc and one of the heavenly knights as master of the Way of the Axe, would come and show them that he could shout louder than all of them combined. That's the situation in the town, Yuna explained. It was impressive how comprehensive Yuna's knowledge was about Orcus Town. She even knew what the Order would do to solve the problem. I have to stop thinking about her as a K-pop idol, Michael thought to himself. Orcus Town looks like the perfect place to start my company in the Queen's region. Although most people in the Queen's region considered Orcus Town as not worth it, Michael knew that he could fully bring it to its full potential, just like how he was able to turn the desolate parched lands into a paradise for everyone. Their problem with resources could easily be solved by Michael's automobile. Their problem of deteriorating establishments could be solved with concrete. As for the orcs, Michael had a plan for them too. Michael turned to Yuna. Can you help me? I don't know much about the Queen's region, and clearly you do. A wide grin formed on Yuna's face. Of course I will. The day after the music festival, the streets of a nation of Reborn continued to be filled with tourists wanting to explore the paradise in the desert. They seemed to have fallen in love with everything this nation had to offer. Once they experienced the cool air of the air conditioner, they couldn't seem to go back to a life with just fanning themselves using a giant leaf. The Rebornians even had to make more inns and hotels to accommodate everyone who wanted to stay in their nation for a longer time. Not only that, but Reborn Nation also had something to offer that no one else in the world could offer, and that was access to the Dwarven Kingdom. It didn't take long for people to realize that the strange metal containers connected to each other, which Rebornians called trains, led into the very heart of the Dwarven Kingdom itself. For a very reasonable 100 gold coins, they could use the train and travel inside the gates of the Dwarven Kingdom, where they could explore and see everything that was closed off to humans for thousands of years. It was a surreal experience, especially since the Dwarven Kingdom was also connected with electricity. It was like a more exotic part of Reborn Nation. Byru, the king of the dwarves, was initially a little bit hesitant after Michael proposed this idea. It was one thing to let humans travel to their kingdom. It was another thing entirely to let them stay inside it for an extended period of time. However, he couldn't argue against the fact that the amount of gold coins they gained from tourists far outweighed anything they could ever sell or produce. The Dwarven King finally understood why Michael was so receptive to tourists. It was all because of money. The dwarves became extremely hospitable to the tourists, especially since the gold coins they earned allowed them to buy more beer and other products from the nation of Reborn. Michael, my friend. On the second day, Byru also traveled to the nation of Reborn to sightsee. Of course, his main objective for this visit was to get more beer for his personal collection, as well as play a little bit of baseball while he was at it. "It's good to see you," Michael said as he shook hands with the Dwarven King. "I think that it's time for us to implement the highway system we've been talking about." The Dwarven King gave Michael a weird look. "You said that we weren't ready yet." But then, he suddenly saw a girl appear from behind Michael. Meanwhile, somewhere in the depths of the Queen's region, there was a group of longtime friends who sat on a circular table, playing cards and drinking ale to pass the time. They all had gray thinning hair, wrinkly skin, and stooped postures. They were old. Real old. Despite that, there was one thing about them that was still full of fire and vigor, and that was their eyes. It still showed the same relentless hunger they had when they were younger. And now, their age had allowed them to gain wisdom and knowledge to act carefully yet decisively. At the very end of the circular table was a man whose legendary name reverberated throughout the whole world. It was none other than the ruthless lion of the business realm, Eyes Vanderbilt. Read exclusive chapters of my virtual library empire. My friends, when has it been since we last convened like this? We should do it more often, he said to his cohorts. In response, the bald old man with sunken eyes and a dark complexion next to him scoffed. "We are not even acquaintances, Eyes. Certainly not even friends. We are your rivals." That man was the founder of the Hephaestus Company, renowned for supplying the whole world with quality weapons and armor. I shrugged his shoulders. "Forgive me for treating you all as such. I feel as if we have all bonded together as we fought on the battlefield we call the market. Who else am I going to call friends if not for my fellow men and women who lead a conglomerate comparable to mine?" That was right. Gathered in this room were the very heads and founders of the leading conglomerates of this world. These few and select groups of people held the world in their hands. It would not be an exaggeration to say that the entire market would crash if something were to happen to this very room. Of course, they had proper defenses to prevent such cases, but the fact that the possible disappearance of these people could create such chaos in the world was more than enough to state their importance. Lighten up, everybody. It was merely a jest. You don't need to act so offended that I called you all my friends. Ice chuckled to himself. In a room full of people with net worths in the trillions of gold coins, Eyes was the only one among them who had a carefree enough attitude to crack jokes. After all, every one of them here considered Eyes as their ultimate rival. It was their life's goal to someday topple the legendary Lion Vanderbilt from his title of the wealthiest man alive. Because of that, they never let down their guard in front of him. But somehow, Eyes never even felt the pressure. He regarded them as his friends and treated their competitiveness as nothing more than banter. It was as if he knew that they could never oust the Vanderbilt name from being the most successful company in the world. This definitely annoyed most of them, which I seem to love doing. The old woman sitting next to Eyes finally had enough and raised her hand. Let's just get to the chase, shall we? We are all taking precious time away from our companies to discuss something important happening in the world. She was the owner of Goldstone Group, the foremost company in real estate and property management. That is right. Another old woman with pink hair nodded. This is a matter that will affect all of us. And despite how we are all competing against each other, we are still living in one world. It will be beneficial for all of us if we exchange information. This particular elder owned the largest apothecary company in the world, making their money from selling potions and managing hospitals. Eyes crossed his arms and cracked his neck. So, what did you all find out? Don't act like you don't know, said the old bald man. I just want to know what you know, Eyes retorted. The whole room fell into silence before another old man on the other side of the table finally opened his mouth. We need to talk about what's happening overseas. The Ocean King and the Draconic Overlord have finally reached an accord. This has tremendous consequences in our continent. That guy was none other than the head of the Osborne family, the only other family that was in contention against the Vanderbilt family for supremacy over the markets. And with his no-nonsense attitude, he announced the root of their problem without waiting for anybody else. This was quite disadvantageous for him because he was telling everyone privileged information that others could use against him, but he didn't care. Well, what do you know? We do have the same information, Eyes said teasingly. You know what this means, right, Eyes? I do, Eyes replied. This means profits will be up for grabs. One of the things that made it troublesome for people to cross the oceans and travel to other continents was because of the treacherous body of water between them. There were naturally occurring whirlpools that spawned out of nowhere, thunderous storms that could form in the middle of calm seas, and even towering tsunamis that were impossible to cross over. Despite his rule over the mighty seas, the Ocean King never helped anyone cross his territory. They were allowed to, but at their own risk. Meanwhile, the Draconic Queen, with her complete rule over all the dragons, used her subjects to offer long-distance journeys crossing continents for a very hefty sum of gold coins. It was a very fruitful business. However, the dragons were still subject to the whims of the natural ocean. They were still troubled by storms and tornadoes trying to cross the unforgiving seas. At least, they used to. Now, the Ocean King and the Dragon Queen have made an agreement. The details were unknown, but there was one thing clear. The dragons could now cross the ocean without any fear of disasters. The Ocean King would give them protection from the mighty seas. This would make intercontinental travel extremely easier, letting more people travel abroad without much risk to their lives. In short, there would be more tourists in the coming years. Rich tourists with gold to spend. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we need to restart the Golden Road, Eyes declared to the room with a smile on his face. What was the Golden Road? It was a network of trade routes that connected all the territories of the Queen's region. And where did this route start? It was none other than Orcustown. The Golden Road used to be a place where commerce and trade were abundant. It was a market filled with the exchange of goods from all over the continent, creating demand and supply that eventually made everyone prosper in the long run. It was where Eyes Vanderbilt and a lot of other people in this room had their start. I started as a lowly peddler in the Golden Road, trekking the entire continent, trying to sell spice and silk to earn a couple of bronze coins to spend. Eventually, he grew his business into what it was now. However, due to the disasters occurring in merchant ships while crossing the different continents, the trade of exotic goods and items eventually came to a stop. Eyes and a lot of other companies didn't think it was worth it to spend billions of gold on buying a ship, manning it with a crew, and sending on a months-long journey just for them to die in the ocean. They lost a lot of money trying to keep the Golden Road. Eventually, they lost too much and stopped investing in the Golden Road altogether, leading to its degradation and eventual demise. As much as I hate to agree with you, you're right, the bald old man muttered. The Hephaestus Company would earn a lot from selling armor on the Golden Road. I'm sure there will be a lot of weary and tired travelers landing in our continent after traveling by dragon wings, said the pink-haired old woman. Dragon wings were what they called the service dragons offered to transport people across oceans to another continent. People often experienced nausea after traveling with the dragons, which the old woman could take advantage of by selling medicine to cure their sickness. Having a lot of tourists will certainly help all of us. They'll need a place to stay, said the old woman who owned a lot of inns and taverns in the Queen's region. So we're all in agreement, then? We shall re-establish the Golden Road and fill our coffers with enough gold coins that will even make the dragons feel insecure. Eyes claimed, his eyes burning with passion yet again. The whole room went silent as they began making plans in their heads. They knew that whoever controlled the Golden Road would eventually control the entire market of the Queen's region. If they played it right, they could essentially monopolize the profits to be made off of those tourists from the other continents. To do that, they needed to create a hub for the Golden Road. The hub was where people and products landed and where everything was distributed, meaning that if they controlled the hub, they could control where and how the products would be sold. Each of these conglomerate leaders had plans to make a hub of their own. They would transform one of their territories and make it popular enough to entice tourists. If it was popular enough, more and more people would choose to land there rather than anywhere else on the Golden Road, making it a hub for commerce and tourism. To do that, they needed a place that was connected to a lot of places in the Queen's region, a place that had a direct route towards even the deepest parts of the continent. There was already one place perfect as a hub for the Golden Road. It was none other than Orcus Town. They used to be the official hub of all trade coming in and out of the Queen's region. It was the best place to distribute products all over the continent because of its interconnecting routes in different territories. Stay connected with my virtual library empire. Orcus Town was like the bottom vein of a leaf. All the roads from this vein spread outwards into the edges, allowing nutrients to travel evenly in the leaf. Because of that, Orcus Town used to be a place that had fierce competition among companies. Whoever could get a spot in the town could have their hands on the very pulse of the Golden Road itself. But because of natural disasters and the eventual degradation of the Golden Road, Orcus Town became nothing more than a shell of itself. It became a ghost town. Even now, Eyes and the rest of the people in the room considered Orcus Town as a lost cause. The place had collapsed beyond repair. They would rather rebuild the hub in their territories in the hopes that they would be able to control it in the future. Even Eyes was hard at work, thinking with his hands in his mouth. But just then, someone knocked on the door and entered the room. Eyes recognized him as one of his attendants. He ordered them not to disturb the room unless absolutely necessary. So, whatever he had to say was definitely something important. "Sir, I have some news," said the butler as he bowed towards Eyes. Seeing his friends glaring at him for being too loud, Eyes chose to leave the room and listen to his attendant's report. A minute passed after Eyes left the room, when all of a sudden, they all heard a burst of raucous laughter coming from the door. Everyone gazed at the door with a curious look. They had never heard Eyes laugh that hard since forever. He wasn't even that happy when the Vanderbilt Company gained global dominance. The door then opened, and Eyes returned to the room. "Why were you laughing?" they asked him. Eyes chuckled and sat back down his seat. "I just heard something very interesting. I don't think any of you are going to believe me even if I told you, so I won't tell you. But things have changed now. We will still establish a new Golden Road, but I have a proposition for you all." The people at the table listened carefully to Eyes' next words. "I will not be participating in the Golden Road, for as long as you all don't participate as well. Let's let our descendants fight it out." Gasps rang out in the room. They had never heard such a bold proposal from Eyes. It was uncharacteristic of him. He would never suggest that in a million years unless something serious happened. It made them wonder what kind of news he heard from his butler. Everyone gazed at Eyes silently, with their minds constantly turning as they tried to figure out the reason for his sudden change of heart. The Vanderbilt Lion would never willingly back out of a competition, especially one against his friends. After all, each of the people in this room was a real threat to his dominion over the global market. The Golden Road was the chance they needed to finally overtake the Vanderbilt business. Eyes would be an idiot to let his less-than-stellar descendants handle the business in the Golden Road rather than himself. He was far too selfish to do that. "You want to create a playground for the children?" the old bald man asked him. "I do," Eyes replied with a devious grin on his face. They all exchanged silent looks as they tried to decipher the hidden agenda in Ai's plans. After years and years of getting bested by the Vanderbilt Lion, they knew Ai's well enough to know that he wasn't going to make a bet that he knew he wouldn't win. Even still, no matter how much they thought about it, this proposal was beneficial for them all. The biggest benefit of it all was the fact that the main man himself, Ai's, wasn't going to dip his hands in the Golden Road business. Even if they weren't going to admit it outwardly, they knew that Ai's Vanderbilt had a high chance of dominating the Golden Road market if they had all fought head-on against each other. Some of them were even considering fighting just for the second-place position from the start. That was how much of a threat he was. But now that Ai's promised to stay his hand as long as they stayed theirs, then this meant that they had a much greater chance of finally overcoming the mountain that was the Vanderbilt business. Sure, they wouldn't be able to use their full resources to conquer the Golden Road, but that also meant that Ai's wouldn't be able to use his immense wealth to bully his way through the market. It would all come down to their descendants and their sub-companies. It was the battle of the future heirs and future inheritors of these conglomerates. And as far as they knew, no descendant of Ai's Vanderbilt could come close to his brilliance. Not even his direct children showed any sign of becoming a cub that could grow into a lion. Compared to the other conglomerates who all had a few standout descendants who were already showing their talents in the global market, the Vanderbilt family was sorely lacking in contenders for the competition in the Golden Road. I accept your proposal. Me too. I agree as well. Everyone raised their hands to quickly solidify their agreement. They didn't want to give Ai's any more time to second-guess himself and back out of this agreement. After all, this was the chance that they had been waiting for to finally defeat him. Ai's Vanderbilt smiled and raised the glass of mead in his hands, which the rest reciprocated. And so it is done. I wish all of you good luck in this competition. Ai's gulped down the whole glass. The others did too, with each one showing a satisfied smile on their faces, thinking that they had the upper hand. They were giddy at the fact that the Lion Vanderbilt had finally shown his weakness. And now, it was time for them to strike. But of course, none of them was happier than Ai's himself. After all, he had just found out something incredibly amazing just a few minutes ago. His youngest grandson had allied himself with the Dwarven Kingdom. This was a feat that even he was unable to do. It was absurd to think that Michael was only a child, yet he was able to do something that even none of these conglomerates could ever dream of doing. It was so absurd that he had a laugh. Ha ha ha. Michael, I knew that you had my killer instinct within you. Show me. Show me more. Show everyone that the Vanderbilt name is never dead. I will be waiting for you at the end of the Golden Road. Back in the nation of Reborn, after Michael introduced Yuna to the Dwarven King, the plan for the highway was quickly set into motion. With Yuna's expertise in diplomacy, she immediately outlined a plan to contact Orcustown and gain their trust. Once that was done, they could connect the concrete roads to the Queen's region, opening up the possibilities for expansion. Of course, Michael first needed to personally visit the town and see the place for himself. He and a couple of the Rebornian engineers needed to scout the current situation in the area and make plans to reinforce the entire structure to make it less prone to disasters. Oh, Byru, I'm planning on connecting the railway to the other parts of the King's region. What do you think about it? He asked the Dwarven King. Sure. The more tourists there are, the better, Byru said, while wearing a baseball jersey and drinking a beer in his hands. After seeing the positive feedback from the tourists, Michael planned to connect both electricity and railways to the entirety of the King's region as soon as possible. We'll provide you with all the materials you'll need, Byru promised. Wait, you're planning on constructing railways all over the King's region and creating another steam turbine at the same time? Yuna questioned. That would cost too much money. Yuna estimated that the amount of materials it would take to complete those tasks was already in the hundreds of millions of gold. And she wasn't even accounting for the labor yet. Ha. Looks like you still don't know much about my friend here. He's obscenely rich, you know, Byru said as he put his arms around Michael. You'll save so much more money if you start those projects separately, Yuna said. Find more chapters on my virtual library empire. In response, Michael looked around the smiling tourists in his nation. I want them to experience the same comfort as our nation in their own homes. That's my endgame, he said to her genuinely. Yuna stared at Michael. He then shrugged his shoulders before walking away. Besides, it's just a couple of 100 million gold. After some preparations, Michael was finally ready to journey to the Queen's region using the highway system in the Dwarven Kingdom. Coming with him were the Dragonborn siblings, who refused to let Michael go anywhere without protection, as well as various Rebornians who could each contribute different skills and talents when needed. Yuna and her escorts also tagged along since they were already planning on going back to the Queen's region. As much as she and the rest of her escorts wanted to stay in the nation of Reborn, her parents would freak out if she didn't return after a few months of travel. Her skills as a diplomat were also incredibly helpful in the Queen's region. She would serve as a much-needed aid for Michael to navigate through the political landscape of a foreign land. Before they left, though, Michael left the nation in Lolo's hands, who proved himself adept at handling the Rebornians and keeping them in check. After the festival, the number of tourists remained high, which meant that everyone's workload increased significantly. Even though they had no electricity yet, people were already pre-ordering their own air conditioning systems and refrigerators to use in the future. Perhaps they just like to see it in their houses to remind them of the good times they had in the nation of Reborn. But all in all, the amount of gold they earned from this ended up helping cover the costs of the new projects Michael had started in the King's region. While he would be busy establishing the company in a new region, the Rebornians would be busy planning railroads and laying the foundations for the electric lines that would modernize everything and put it up to Rebornian standards. Thankfully, the mages and wizards from the Magic Tower offered their services to speed up the construction. It seemed that they were quite desperate for money to afford their own customized Mithril Wand artifact. It took them quite a few days before they finally reached the Dwarven Kingdom. There, they were greeted by eager dwarves who showed Michael the newly constructed concrete highway. It was divided into two, one for entering the Queen's region and one for leaving it. In the middle of this highway were tall street lamps that illuminated the whole place at night. Michael built this with the high-speed driving in mind, to make overnight trips much safer and faster overall. "This is amazing. Thanks for your help," Michael said to the hard-working dwarves. "Take the week off. I'll give you an all-expenses-paid trip to our nation for you and your families. Enjoy." The dwarves cheered after hearing this. They weren't able to join the music festival because of this project, so now they were glad they got to see their work had paid off. Meanwhile, in the depths of a forest, a couple of peddlers tried to hike through the uneven terrain of the land. "Are you sure it isn't dangerous here?" the youngest among them asked. "No, there weren't any earthquakes last night, so the ground won't suddenly collapse under our feet," the oldest replied. "That doesn't make me feel better. Why are we risking our lives here again?" "I thought this place was a ghost town," the youngest asked. The oldest peddler looked back. "Orcus Town needs our help. They're dying of hunger and thirst. Buying our wares is their only way to survive." But just as they were about to climb over one of the uprooted trees, they suddenly heard a loud, thumping sound echoing through the forest. It boomed through their bodies, rattling their very bones. "Bu, 2, 2, Bu, 2, 2, Bu, 2, 2, ra, ta, ta, ra, ta, ta, ra, ta, ta." The thumping sounds were accompanied by growls and guttural shouts, which continued to get louder and louder with each echo. It was at this point that they realized that those weren't echoes. Those were the culmination of hundreds of other creatures shouting at the top of their lungs, each one trying to outdo the other. The peddlers suddenly felt their hearts palpitate from the sheer, deafening sound coming from the forest. The eldest peddler looked back at his team. "Let's go back," he said decisively. Meanwhile, just up ahead of the forest was a gathering of orcs, with their pig-like snouts and their large, almost obese figures that made them look very intimidating even against their kind. On the left side were orcs who had wolf ears on the top of their heads, as well as patches of gray fur sparsely spread throughout their bodies. They called themselves the Orcanine tribe. On the right side were orcs who had very short ears and skin with rock-like patches that had spikes coming out of the roots. They were called the Orcupine tribe. Despite how it looked, these two orc groups were not the violent type. They made it their principle to solve their fight through a show of dominance. "Bu, 2, 2, The Orcanine tribe shouted, squatting and slapping their meaty thighs to produce a thumping sound. Ra, ta, th, the Orcupine tribe answered, strumming the spikes on their bodies to imitate the sound of a snake rattling its tail. These two tribes postured to show their dominance, yet none of them showed any sign of relenting. Leave. We stay here. No, you leave. We keep our place here. The two leaders exchanged pleasantries. Meanwhile, in the middle of the calm ocean, a sudden gust of wind disturbed the large cumulonimbus clouds populating the blue skies. Large winged creatures broke through the clouds, turning them into nothing but mist. These were none other than giant wyverns, creatures from the proud draconian race. And if one were courageous enough to go above the wyverns, then they would see an incredible sight. Constructed above the wide ribcage of the wyvern's body was a small town complete with wooden houses and constructs. Not only that, but it was also populated by hundreds, if not thousands, of humans and demi-humans. Find your next adventure on my virtual library empire. A destination? None other than the continent in the distance.